YouTube and Twitch. The problem was that it was unlisted, and since it was unlisted, it wasn't showing up on YouTube. So I made it public, and it's still not showing up. Motherfucker. Fucking hell. Well, I'm happy we did this early. Public. Publish. Let's go. Let's fucking go. Fucking shitting me, dude. Do I have to call Taze? What the fuck? Here we go. All right, so on my homepage, it's showing me live. That's good at least. And I do like that channel art popping up as the default art. That's cool. Where the fuck? Are you serious? Dude, I'm going to my home YouTube and it's not showing me up. There we go. Oh, thank God. Fucking hell. All right. Oh my God. The fucking... No, fuck you, Cullivar. We're not that boomer today. It was literally... So I'll explain it. Yeah, sometimes you just got to do some foreplay. You're right. You got to warm up the chat. So, no, it wasn't necessarily shit. Thought I was going to go watch this from Andrew's stream. Well, I mean, you can go watch from Andrew's stream if you want. We'll survive Andrew's thought. I appreciate you being here either way. Just run us in the background. That way we get nice, pretty stats. So, yeah, just to explain, we're going to be talking about homelessness, but it will be with Big Papa Fashless and Erudite, which I'm excited to talk to Erudite. She seems like a smart cookie, and you know, her and President Sunday's drama this week was pretty fucking fun, so that's pretty good. And then just telling you exactly what happened. So we're trying to unlist and post the debates to... We're posting them to our second channel because basically we want to worship the algorithm more effectively. So we're posting it to the Counterpoints Coliseum, and I'm going to grab my link, and I'm going to post it in both chats. Hey, hey, Friday. You better be touching grass, touching ass, or hanging out with Counterpoints. Either way. Those are the options. So let me make sure that this works. Yeah, so if you check out that link, we're basically posting all of the debates and conversations from the past couple of years there. And my D&D game, that's not it. That's the old one. Where's the new one? Sorry, here's the notifications. You can own a belt-fed machine gun? All right, cool. So we got some subscribers, and somebody was talking shit about Mike from PA, which is exactly what you should be doing. And yeah, so watching leftoids, like I understand there's a decent chunk of leftoids in my audience, but the meltdown over Roe v. Wade is actually quite interesting. I'm surprised we're still talking about homelessness tonight, considering Roe v. Wade literally just got released. And on top of that, we're on a panel with a Christian conservative. Like, Big Papa Fascist, if you thought I had right-wing sympathies, he makes me look like a fucking commie. So the fact that we're still talking about this stuff is kind of funny. But, all right, we got 3 minutes. I need to grab my glasses because I don't want my eyeballs to hurt halfway through. I will be right back, but it will be fun. We'll be talking to Erudite about homelessness. We'll be checking out a website called Lockhorns.io, which is created by somebody who just emailed me, but it is like a debate space. And I think it could be, while most people are going to choose to use Twitter and use all that kind of stuff, I think that if you were hyper autistic and you wanted to track the arguments, you could use this platform in order to do that kind of stuff in a fun way. So I'll literally be back in about 60 seconds. Just going to go grab my glasses. 1 second. You know, I wish that I was double fisting whiskey, and I need to get like anti-glare so you guys don't have to see the screens anymore. But these are literally like $10 blue light glasses from Amazon because I'm a fucking boomer and my eyes hurt after fucking 6 hours. But looks like we're meeting up. Let's get in here. Let the violence begin. AFK, panel waiting room. Okay, cool. I'm where I'm supposed to be. They can yell at me when it's time to go. But how you doing, chat? How are you coping with not being able to abort your 8.5 months old fetuses? How you feeling? Vici says Counterpoints. Glad you joined the cabal. Yeah, I'm a member of so many secret organizations at this point. I'm a part of like Aristocracy's secret Jewish organization, even though I'm not Jewish. That was a great honor to be part of the Twitch Illuminati. I'm a part of a cartoon animation group that basically is going to be shit talking the Twitch and YouTube political sphere. Hello, Nick the Clicker. And now I'm a part of the cabal. So honestly, if that's a 40K reference, then fucking base. Because if I can be immortal and talk multiple languages and all that kind of shit, then it's going to be good. Then looks like we have some folks joining. Then all right, I'm going to mute myself on Discord. That way, if I'm continuing to talk shit with y'all, then I'm not, not going to be that big of a deal. Honestly, I'm good. Honestly, I don't think I'm going to need an abortion. Yeah, obviously there's a more chill way to view this, but some people are quite passionate, including some family members of mine. So it's been a little bit of a rough day, not going to lie. I coach by adding you to the list of streamers that me shouts out on my Discord server. Based. All right, very cool. Although I guess I'll be pissing them off because I'm more moderate than most folks. Although I'll miss the floating in my soup. Jesus. All right, getting a little dark here. Most of my family is conservative, so it barely affects me at all. Really,
at least that might lead to a time where people actually have to just consider what the intent was behind a word before they just label it, whether it's going to be bad or not.
Interesting.
Hold on. I got to close my fridge. It's beeping at me.
What's up, sluts?
What's up?
Yo.
How's it going?
Pretty good. I fucking love that hair, bro. Holy shit.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Best
hair on Twitch.
I'm trying to think. Like the only person who's even coming close is like maybe Dario Rahim, or that's about it. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I don't know how much else I'm good for. But I can't even keep my background up. I look like I'm Stardust said I look like I'm filming from a prison. I think that was accurate, but
yeah.
I made it here today.
Orange jumpsuit,
thanks for showing
black
up.
Background. Yeah, of course.
Well, what was that?
I was just saying, orange jumpsuit, black background. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm rocking that prison. I'm rocking that prison aesthetic.
It does look like you're in like the minimum security prison library, except for the chair. Yeah. Like the chair is a little bit of an upgrade over a prison.
Yeah,
that's true. Well, if you were sitting if you knew how shitty this chair I'm sitting in right now is, and how broken it is, you might disagree. There might have, it might have been some bargain bin thing that they got out back.
I'm anti-racer chair in general, to be honest. I got
brainwashed. I looked for so long at just some kind of steel case or blue case, whatever it is, blue steel. I forget the exact name. Office chair, and I'm going with this thing. I got to say the leather feels nice, but
yeah,
I paid like an extra $100 for the big boy chair. All right, because I'm a big boy. I break pretty much everything I sit or lay down in. It's a problem. Like bed frames, chairs, sofas. Nothing lasts. And
you know what the secret? I have the secret for you. So it's called a sacral wedge. It basically cups your tailbone, so your tailbone sits evenly between your butt cheeks and your hip bones, and it basically unfucks your lower back. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So
add that to your size-wise. So.
Yeah, add that to your repertoire.
This thing was the first thing to break. Sacral wedge. All right. Yeah. I'll have to Google that. Welcome, Notsoerudite and Ame C3. Am I pronouncing that right?
Close, Amy.
Amy, okay. Oh, Amy EC3.
Yay.
I'm a robot. I don't know. I parse things like binary or something.
You sounded it out letter by letter.
I do this all the time.
Sure, if you're familiar with Kanye West and his spelling. I get that so often. Like in college, a lot of my guy friends would call me Omye just because, you know.
I don't know how I pronounce Notsoerudite's name correctly, but I'm also apparently one of the only people on Twitch who do it, at least by my standard.
Not
Is
so
it just
areola.
Kyla? Is that surprising?
Kyla's pretty hard to say too to a lot of people, so hard to say.
Yeah, like Destiny. I
A
watched
lot
that
of K
video.
was slipping there. Yeah.
Yeah,
At some
Kyla,
point,
That was a
Kylo,
good one,
Pyro.
yeah.
at some point, I thought he was fucking shit posting because I was like, it's the third fucking time, okay, bud? Like,
I know. Everyone's like, it's such a funny meme, and I was like, I
It's
don't think
not
it was a
that
joke.
crazy.
I don't
It is
think
not.
White
he
women
knew.
names are the same.
It's okay. I tended to my hurt feelings afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does that.
That's why I
Good,
picked
good.
this. That's why I picked a screen name that can be abbreviated to 3 letters. It's harder to fuck up.
Excellent. Well, that's why I picked the name Professor Meat. I don't know how that's supposed to track, but
I was
hey,
about to say,
welcome
it's just
everybody.
terrifying.
It is what the last part is one syllable. Well, it is that's the point, you see, because we are all meat. We are all
Yeah.
meat descriptively, and yet it makes us to describe us as so makes us arbitrarily uncomfortable. You know? I'd like to explore that, but this isn't the time for that. This is not quite that kind of meat panel. This is a much more mundane type of meat panel. Welcome everybody. Thanks for showing up today. I appreciate you guys showing up to talk about this. Oh wait, we are waiting on still one more person, aren't we? Let me DM the
Sneaky debate
the
tactics.
terrifying Big Papa fascist.
With a dumb name.
Yeah, I know, right? Like it's way more than one syllable.
Yeah, right.
Oh my god, I'm booming. Okay.
Boomer.
Okay, he said give me a sec, I'll be on the way. How's your guys' week on Twitch been? Has it been a successful
Oh, it's a
time
fucking
fighting out there in the
nightmare.
intellectual
What?
battlegrounds?
Madam.
Madam?
That's
Oh
right.
yeah.
Oh my god! I was
That was
watching
fun.
it after the fact in Stardust chat, and I was like, I love how this dude. This all started because he was getting mad at Destiny for amplifying racism, then defaulted to misogyny. Like 3 minutes into a conversation, he was uncomfortable in. I was like, you're literally just being the things that you think Destiny shouldn't amplify. Like, what are you doing?
I gotta say, the most fucking annoying thing that people do on this website is like, 1, I know what you're gonna say. 2, you're wasting my time. It's like we spend more time talking about whether or not we're wasting time than we would for me to articulate my fucking idea, you dipshit. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
So I felt for you. That's why
I also
I said
noticed
God
that-
damn in the comments, because like he came at you pretty hard and you just came right back. I was like, oh shit.
I also noticed you gave him the opportunity to like frame his argument in a really generous way at the very beginning. And he's like, how about you tell me? But then every time you tried to say what you thought his argument was, he'd interject and try to tell you. And you were like, I gave you the time.
Which is why I tried to give him the time. I assumed that he was going to want to clarify his position. So I was like,
Are you guys still setting up?
We're just waiting on you.
Yeah,
well, our embarrassing green screen has been exposed. So
What's embarrassing about my green screen?
isn't there a stain on it?
No.
It looks like a little stain.
Little dot on
It looks like a stain.
Like Amy's got her green screen fucking ready to go.
No need to pay attention to my prism like that.
Smoke stains, okay?
Yeah.
Fucking
Professor
blame my
Mead's
dog.
CIA black side is going incredibly well. So
It's okay. I'm keeping my location secret for all of your protection.
yeah. I picked this angle so I don't have to decorate the wall behind me.
Clever. Similar strategy. Except in my case, it's more like it's less so that I don't have to decorate and more so that I don't have to clean up. That being said, thank you, all of you, for being here. I'm not going to keep the masses waiting any longer. This is something I was interested in talking about. It's an issue that doesn't get talked about very much, but I've been trying to do 2 things. I want to try having a little bit more productive conversations on the platform, and I want to maybe delve into some issues that don't have the easiest answers. I think this is a good opportunity for a conversation like that. So now that we're all here, I'd like to just lay down a little bit of ground rules about how I intend to moderate. I'm going to be timing all of you guys. So I'm going to be referencing that to basically keep things moving and to keep things relatively equal. Though I'm not going to be too much of a stickler about it. I am going to be trying to keep you guys down to about 1.5 minutes on any specific point, and I'll sort of give you a little bit of a warning that it's time that you need to wrap up. And that's mainly the main thing. The other thing I'll just say is be good faith to one another. If I detect that there's some shenanigans going on, if I detect there's some intentional obfuscation, or perhaps otherwise of the truth of the matter, if we're not doing our best to like respond to arguments, and it starts to get a little over the top, it starts to get a little too much, the divine righteous moderator will step in and declare the truth from there. All right. So that being said, I appreciate all of you coming here, and I'm gonna get right into the prompt. And then I'll just give us a little bit of a leading question just to butt us off, just to jump us off from there. So the basic subject of conversation, as it has been framed. So I want to ask, there's sort of two questions, maybe more here, but like basically the topic is, do we have societal responsibilities to homeless individuals? And to the extent that we might, what exactly are responsibilities? We have various approaches to these problems, but not all of them seem perfect. Not all of them necessarily seem complete. Homeless shelters, transition homes don't necessarily seem to always be enough. But it's not necessarily clear what challenges that we're failing to meet. So that being, that's sort of the first part of the contention. The second part of the contention is tent cities. Perhaps you could call them just homeless encampments in general. When set up in public spaces, provide sort of a difficult solution for the public. They have a lot of issues of policing. They can provide a lot of danger to the surrounding areas, both for the community at large and the population. And our response to these matters, along with the imperfect solutions that we provide for homelessness, sort of further complicate the issue of dealing with homeless encampments when they pop up. So that being said, as the sort of framing of the conversation, to kick us off, I'll just say, very simple question. Do we have societal responsibilities to homeless individuals, and if so, what are they?
Is there like an opening statements round, or are we just sort of like...
There is an opening. Yeah, there is going to be open statements. Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No problem.
This is my second panel. I'm looping around the track too fast. So we're going to go ahead and start. That is going to be the question that's going to kick us off. But we're just going to go ahead with opening statements from there, and we're going to just go as in order on my screen, and we'll go in the reverse order for closing statements. So Amy, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, my name is Amy C3, and to answer your question, yes, we do have an obligation to care for those who have fallen victim to an oppressive system that has allowed people to fail miserably through no fault of their own. In many cases, those who are experiencing homelessness were either priced out of their own apartment, or they may have experienced some sort of life-altering event because of a lack of social safety nets and other government spending or programming. People are slipping through the cracks, and they are still remaining productive, working, and of course we should be helping them get through any hard time, especially because so much of our taxpayer dollars go towards subsidies for the billionaire class, the military industrial complex, and other bureaucratic functioning that is to the detriment of society, in my opinion. So to answer your question, yes, we do have that obligation to the public and the unhoused specifically.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also, although I am timing you guys as well right now, and I would ask to try to keep it about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes on opening statements. I appreciate the brevity. Big Papa Fascist.
Yeah, so there's probably a problem right away, which is I don't think probably anybody on this panel, other than maybe Counterpoints, can actually ground why we have some type of moral obligation to do any of these things for anybody. But in order to be as good faith as I can possibly be, the answer would be no. There is no responsibility from the state to take care of homeless people. That's absurd. There might be a moral responsibility for people who are religious or who have some type of conviction that way, but I have I have my doubts that I'm going to hear very much tonight on why we have an actual moral obligation to do anything, and just a lot of kind of bleeding heart. We should do this because it feels good, and that's probably it. But so yeah, that's my opening statement.
All right, thank you very much. From there, we're gonna move on to counterpoints.
Yeah, so we do have a responsibility, and the reason why we have a responsibility is because I'm a communitarian. I'm leaving the libertarian or liberal or collective cringe in the past. What I mean by that is that individuals have a responsibility to the collective, collective has a responsibility to the individual, and that we're best suited off when these needs are balanced. And basically, when you treat a part of yourself as an alien or an external entity, like homeless people, then what can happen is all these negative externalities, like you were talking about, drug abuse, crime, robbery, theft, all that kind of stuff, making public areas unlivable or unsustainable for families. So I do think that right now, we'll be talking about homeless encampments later. We kind of kick the can down the road. Whereas if we were looking at cohesive solutions, we might be able to get something a little bit better from a utilitarian analysis. That being said, I also think that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And we have to be careful with not throwing cash away on things with perverse incentives or throwing cash away towards things that make our society worse, but they make us feel better. I think we have to be smart, and there has to be a give and take there where if somebody no longer wants to be homeless, no longer wants to be addicted, we can give them a ramp out of their situation. But if they want to abuse drugs, if they want to rob, steal, do whatever in order to survive, and they just want to be in their current situation, then we'll let them do that and suffer consequences. So I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, I appreciate it. Moving on from there, Jebtan.
Yeah, I mean, I fall in a similar place to Counterpoints, I think. I like the way the written prompt was, which is, do we have a societal responsibility to homeless people? It's not necessarily to care for them, like Counterpoints is saying, not necessarily to baby them through to being able to be a functional human being, no matter how long that takes or how many resources that takes. I think societally, because our government is meant to represent the people, we have a responsibility to structure things in a way where homeless people have access to ways to no longer be homeless. Easy access, and access that is free. Things like free IDs, make it easier to apply, so that it is easier to apply for federal programs, things like that. As far individual responsibility toward them that Big Papa Fascist was discussing, I don't think we as Christians think that only we have a moral responsibility to our fellow man. I think we as Christians believe that people have responsibility to help care for our fellow man. But yeah, I agree with Counterpoints that the societal responsibility is limited to giving them a jumping off point. We can discuss whether we think we've given them an adequate jumping off point. I think that we need to attack things like drug addiction counseling and sexual assault counseling in a more robust way, because two of the biggest issues you find keeping people from being able to function in society are, the drug abuse that got them homeless or the sexual abuse they experienced while being homeless. So I don't think we need to basically throw money at them until they can pay rent solely with the money they're thrown out by the government. But I think we need to give them a proper jumping off point, and there's definitely a discussion to be had as to what that looks like.
Okay. And from there, we're going to be moving on to Notsoerudite.
Sure. When I look at responsibility, I think we can kind of mean two things, which is the micro analysis, which would be an individual's responsibility, and then at the macro level is the state's. And so when it comes to an individual, I don't think any single individual has any responsibility to caretake for another member of society. However, I would argue it is good to do so, right? I would say it is a moral action when people choose to do that. And if you actively try to harm individuals, I'd say that's obviously immoral. At a state level, I would argue that there is some level of responsibility. However, that's going to be complex because in each nation, and depending on the decade, you're going to have various factors that are predicting what is leading to homelessness, right? So if you have a state where most people are homeless because of like major inflation of housing prices and people can't afford, and they're very transitionary of getting homes, can't afford, back out, getting back at home, that's a different issue than, for example, somebody who is chronically substance abusing. And the way that you attend to those is different. So I think there's some level of responsibility. And particularly for the state, I think it is only in a state's best benefit to caretake for these people.
Okay.
I'll get into that later.
Cool. So from there, it seems like the point of contention is pretty much lined up, and I'll just restate the sub-opening statement before the sub prompt, you could say, as I pass it back to you guys. Why do or do not we have responsibilities to the homeless, and what exactly? How do we decide what those are?
Well,
Are we talking about a
BPF,
macro
I
or
thought you were
micro
gonna.
level?
Yeah.
He's the only one who has. who's got
BPF
the-
seem to be the main contender. I mean, we can push right back to that to more practical solutions if we'd
I
like.
can throw
but-
some elbows too. I think Erudite was actually about to ask or made a delineation in her opening statement that I think is important: individuals versus like collective. So when we're talking about like, do I, as an individual, when I walk out, I'm working 40 hours a week, paying my taxes, all that kind of stuff. Do I have an obligation to rehouse like a homeless person within my own residence? Probably not. Do we as a community, either as a religious community, have a responsibility to fix these issues? I think long term we do. And if anything, that's one of the problems in American society right now is we don't. There is no communitarian reinforcement because of the death of the church or the atrophying of the church. We are seeing people fall through the cracks. And then that brings up the question of whether or not the state is responsible to do so. My answer isn't necessarily like, yes, 100%, the state has to take care of every single person ever. But it's also more like, you got to meet them halfway, because otherwise you're just squandering resources, and we are in a scarce society. We have to be effective with those resources. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I think it even comes down to the good old-fashioned conservative, make change individually before you tell everybody else to make changes collectively. If you think that homelessness is an issue in your community, and you are also saying that you have no responsibility to at least advocate for certain change that might reduce homelessness in your community, is that really the pick yourself up by your bootstraps attitude that like conservatives and individualists are known to have? That doesn't have to be advocating for government social programs. Like Counterpoints said, the church has always been pretty open to providing aid to people. And if that's your avenue of attacking the issue, that's your avenue. As far as the overarching question, though, if you are saying, I'm not going to advocate for government social programs where there's a lot of involuntary contribution to the social program, but I'm willing to go through my church and help homeless people, I would argue you still, to some extent, believe that you have some communal responsibility to care for the homeless in your area, because you identify the problem, you see that it's a problem, you see how it hurts you, them, and everyone around you. But if you're not willing to do anything about it, I don't know how...
What's communal responsibility? Can you explain what that is to me? I'd like to know what communal responsibility is.
So there's a responsibility individually that you have, basically take care of your family, take care of your home, and things like that. But I think there are issues that don't necessarily impact you as an individual as severely as they do impacting your community. And whether you're talking about the government and their direct charge to represent the people that they represent, or the church with the direct charge to benefit the community they're in through the grace of God, you have a responsibility communally.
Well, so is it a feeling? This communal responsibility is just a feeling of obligation that you have that to a community? Is that
No,
what it
I would
is?
argue it's a direct enumerated charge. So the government says we represent the people of this country. Well, that includes the homeless people. So they have a direct charge enumerated in what established them to help those people. And then the church has directly enumerated, biblical text.
Yeah, but we're talking about
this
concept, this bizarre concept you said of communal responsibility that's on the individual level.
It's not bizarre.
Well, it is bizarre because I still don't understand what it is. Is it a feeling, or is you say it's a charge, but then you bring up the government and you bring up these other things that have nothing to do with the individual. Why does the individual communally responsible for anything?
Well, why would an individual... Yeah, I'm not saying it. I'm saying the individual is responsible for some things, and then communally, we as the community are responsible for some things. I'm not saying any individual is communally responsible for anything. That is oxymoronic. Yeah, I don't...
Okay, so me as an individual, why am I responsible for homeless people?
Because you are part of a community that is communally responsible.
Responsible for unhoused people. This is a really weird conversation to be had, because we're starting from the pretext that we are accepting an unjust society that allows class warfare to determine a multitude of factors. Where we are born determines where we end up in life, and that is due to...
Well, what's a just society?
Yes.
What would be what can you point to and be like, BPF, here's the just society that we should emulate, where all of the unhoused people are not homeless. I don't want to be not politically correct for you. So let's just what's the society that we should emulate? Where we should what can you point this out for me?
Well, in other countries, more developed nations that have less GDP than we do, they have universal health care, they have a robust public housing model, they don't allow people to end up homeless. They have preventative measures in place by way of offering universal programming to those who might not be able to cover the full cost of unfettered capital assistance, including the housing market, which right now has reached an unprecedented level. Asking prices for rent has surpassed $2,000 a month. That means that over a 3-year period, the average or median cost of rent has gone up by $1,000, and wages have not stayed up to date with the amount of inflation, specifically in the housing market. So with wages virtually remaining stagnant over the last 40 years and the cost of housing rising to exponential levels, how are you expected to make ends meet whenever the Federal Reserve right now is imposing monetary policies that is attempting to stave off inflation rates, but they know that it could lead to more unemployment than what we saw during COVID-19?
So these are swell problems, right? And like, look at
These
all these
are
problems. Look at
positions
all.
that are
Hang
taken
on,
by
hang on.
authorities
Look at all
that are
these
so
issues. I mean,
responsible
this
for
is
monetary policy.
well,
This is
this
a
is
policy
great,
failure.
but
One
considering
second,
the
just let me
fact
respond.
that we're not going to implement socialism next Tuesday or anytime soon, probably not in my lifetime or your lifetime. How about something that's feasible and viable that can actually be done rather than this type of utopian thinking that we're going to become Norway tomorrow, which is insane? How about something that's viable?
So what's your
So
viable?
I'll step in here real quick and just say, like, we can talk about what's viable, but it seemed like the contention was whether or not we should be
Yeah.
even having that conversation, right?
Can I-
If we've agreed to that there is some level of communal responsibility that we may designate to the homeless, we can disagree over that if we want.
Well,
but
so the thing is,
if we
though,
agree on that, then we move on to the practical.
I can't. So if people bring up multiple points,
gotcha.
I want to respond to all the points, right? So I have not conceded that there's any type of individual nor communal responsibility to take care of the unhoused among society. I've not agreed to that yet, and I haven't had anybody ground for me yet why I have such a
I think
moral
counterpoints
responsibility.
Yeah,
I think
so
Counterpoints
go ahead,
would
Connor.
stab at it,
yeah, so you kind of asked this question, which I do take seriously, which is what is communal responsibility? Is it just like a feeling? Is it a vibe? Is it just us kind of like waxing philosophical, or is it actually a thing? And what I would say is, yeah, it's actually a thing. Some of these things fall down from biblical mandates, which basically, command that we love thy neighbor as ourselves, or we, help the poor, or we give the, the stranger the shirt off our back. Like there's plenty of biblical references for this. So if you're talking about that, like from a responsibility from a Christian standpoint, there's long Christian tradition for the tithe, which is basically 10% of your income goes back into the community.
Yeah, but none of those are state solutions, Connor.
You're right.
So these are all. So
The
you're
question
talking
was
about
not state
You asked
solutions,
about
though.
community.
Well,
That's
well,
what
hang on,
and
hang
he's
on.
answering you on
Hang
community.
on. The reason I have to cut in, though, is because I need clarification on this. Are you saying that communal responsibility is a spiritual responsibility?
Yes, but I also think that there's plenty of people who, so for instance, like not everybody, I still retain some level of spirituality. I don't expect everybody to. We're on Twitch, for God's sake. Half the people are fucking materialist degens on this fucking platform. So for
You're
them,
kidding. Really?
Yeah, well, bullying them through a materialist analysis, saying that you have similar response. So from a religious, if I was talking to a religious person, I would say that from the Bible, through tithing, you have a responsibility to the poor and the unhoused and all that kind of stuff based off of Scripture. If I was talking to a materialist hedonist, I would say you live in a society surrounded by other people who will affect you ultimately, and as a result, you should take a portion of your income, your energy, or your effort and spend it towards the betterment of other people. And this is actually, like, for me, this is one of the struggles that I have in this space, is there's a lot of nihilist hedonists who do say you have no responsibilities, that you're only responsible for yourself and fuck everybody else, and there's no afterlife, so just do whatever you want, and then when you die you kick the bucket, and who gives a shit. Like, so I don't want to, based off of like a rhetorical or philosophical gotcha, feed into that nihilist impulse. I would rather encourage even nihilists and hedonists from like some kind of rational utilitarian analysis to contribute positively to the betterment of other people.
Oh, but it's not nihilism, Connor, to ask why I have a moral responsibility in many cases to people who are self-harming on purpose, who don't want to get housing, which is something that people often don't want to talk about. That lots of people are drug addicts, and lots of people actually choose to be homeless. And here, one of the richest nations on earth, the gal to my left says, "Hey, Look, if we had all these social programs for housing, we do have social programs for housing.
No, we
Lots and lots
don't.
and lots and
No,
lots
I'm
and lots.
sorry,
Yes,
you're
yes, we
mistaken.
do. Yes,
I
we
am
do.
hold on,
I
hold
am
on.
here to
We
tell you
have
that you
we
are
have lots
mistaken.
of social. Listen, is there homeless shelters in every major metropolitan area?
They're often at
The number
capacity.
of
Hang on, hang on.
the
No, I
the
asked you a
number of beds
specific
that are
question.
available, the ratio of beds to
Well, I thought there
unhoused
weren't any,
people.
though. I thought there weren't any.
I
But now there
didn't
are
say that. I'm
some?
saying
Well,
that there's an
I think
now
inadequate
there are
number
we're
of
some.
getting
beds
caught up in
available
sort of
Let-
and
semantic word
under
games.
budgeted
You have to let her
services.
respond. You
Yeah,
have to
let-
let Amy respond.
Let
Well, I
Amy
don't
respond.
have
Yeah,
to
she's
do
trying to.
anything,
Yes, you do.
but
That's why you're
You
on this
technically
panel.
do,
You
yeah.
are
So it's a
asked to do
you
moderated
guys have the
panel.
mute button.
Would you like me to? If
Well, I
you're
mean, it's your
if you're
show.
suggesting to you, I should start muting you preemptively.
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
you know
I
what
can.
do you know what sparring in a debate is? It's where you spar. So
I don't have a problem with a little bit of sparring. I'm just saying what I'm saying is what something I do have a problem with is basically asking someone a question about something that they didn't say and not giving them the chance to clarify.
well, they
So,
did say it, but okay, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead, Amy.
you asked me if there are zero or if there are shelters in most major metropolitan area. And
Mhm.
the answer is yes, but
Yes.
they are
Okay.
incredibly underfunded, under
Mm.
budgeted, and the ratio of unhoused people to beds in transit, often carceral housing, is the reason why these services are a failure. And there is a lack of funding that is put into these programs, and bridge shelters only go so far, especially because without the necessary funding, it becomes a merit based program. And those who are maybe experiencing addiction because they started to use after they had experienced homelessness for so long, they are now chronic homeless. We don't necessarily know the root cause of the connection between addiction, mental illness, and homelessness.
We
There
don't,
have been
huh?
plenty of surveying that has shown that people who are experiencing homelessness first, they resort to drugs, they resort to alcohol, and then over time their mental health deteriorates. So we don't necessarily know cause and effect here. If
We don't.
experiencing
So
homelessness
so
is what
Well,
here's
is
hold on,
leading
hold on.
to
so I
Before
gotta
we
ask
jump
you.
off,
No, sorry.
before we jump off, we're getting pretty far from the do we have a level of at least a non-zero level of responsibility, right? Because it sounds like you and I agree, BPF, in the sense that we don't believe we have a responsibility to cradle homeless people all the way through to thriving, right? I totally agree. But do we have, either as Christians or as a government that is, enumerated its powers under the condition that it represents the people that reside, whether they're homeless or not, in their country, do we have a level of responsibility to at least provide a jumping off point, right? I'm not saying you can force them to not do drugs or force them to help themselves, but do we have a certain level of responsibility to at least make the road to thriving easy, not in an over cumbersome sense, but in the sense that they can get a free ID so that they can qualify for
who's
SNAP
we?
and WIC and things.
Who's we?
We as parts of the government that
Americans.
represents the people. Yeah, we
Okay.
as those who contribute to the
society.
government that represent. Yes, of course.
Okay, so you're
That's what
asking
we're
me
talking
so once again, if you're asking me if society has some type of obligation to stop the homeless,
responsibility.
no, the answer is no. So again, the reason I keep asking you what you're grounding this on is because I can ground for you why I would say that there's a moral responsibility for why you should take care of people who are suffering or
Mhm.
try to help them in some way. But I don't think any of the socialists on this panel could ever do that in a million years.
Okay, well, hold
You're
on.
just
We're
being
getting over
Can you
political.
outline?
well, no,
wait,
hang
first
on.
of all,
It's
can you
important.
outline if a homeless
Hang
individual?
on.
Because
This is
homelessness is heterogeneous. I you've been talking about. I
look,
haven't talked at all yet.
I'm just trying to finish my thought. Do you want me to or not? If you don't want me to,
You-
whatever.
You were about at your time anyway because it had been going back and forth a little bit. Erudite, I'm going to let Erudite take the floor because she hasn't really spoken on this at all so far.
So what we have to first do, I guess, for BPF is we have to outline if homelessness and homeless individuals are individuals that are suffering and need support. That's kind of the first caveat for this moral framework, which I don't know if we need to handhold BPF into having a moral framework for homelessness, but that's kind of what needs to be done, which in essentially you need to look at the homeless population and you need to understand the heterogeneous nature of homelessness,
Mhm.
right? To act like it's like one single thing for all of them would be obviously stupid. And I would hope nobody on this panel is trying to say all homeless people are the same and they all end up there for the exact same reasons. I'm assuming you're not saying that, Andrew.
I'm sorry, was that a question?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're not saying that the homeless
Well, that sounds
population
like
is
a declarative
heterogeneous.
statement, not a question. So I was just going to let it hang in the air there.
Well,
Because
would you like would
because
you
I,
like
well,
to would you
because if
like
she's,
to confirm or deny it?
well, if
Yeah,
she
the
assumes it,
question's
I assume it
needless.
too, so, but anyway, if it was a question, then the answer to the question is no, I don't assume that there's any one reason for almost anything on planet Earth.
Okay, yeah, that's what I figured, right? So now we have to look into
Right.
like which homeless individuals are suffering and therefore morally do we have some responsibility
Well,
to,
no,
which
no,
maybe
you're
are not.
wrong. So that would be important inside the moral framework of a Christian, but that doesn't really answer the question for why it's moral for one of you socialists.
So let me jump in.
Well,
I'm not
At
a
all.
socialist. I'm not a
So
socialist, but let me jump in real quick. Do you believe in the fundamental idea, right, that government is by the people and for the people? I think we can agree on that, right?
no, we can't agree on that either. And
You
I
don't believe the
absolutely
government should
no.
be by the people or for the people?
No, I'm not. I'm not a person who's a democratist, man. I don't.
Okay, that's
I'm
fine. That's fine.
not big on the whole
So
unfettered expansionary
yeah,
democracy.
totally. Do you agree that
So
that is a framework that exists in a lot of America's mind, though?
Yeah, sure. I'll concede
Okay.
that.
So there is a non-spiritual framework under which where we believe the government, which is for the people, should be representing people, including homeless people. And so
So
if the government is for the people and they have that responsibility, if the government is also then by the people, then the people who contribute to that government by voting or even running for office also have that responsibility because the government is both by those people and for those people. That is a completely non-spiritual moral framework, right? That
dude,
could
I have no
still lead
idea what
someone
the
to
hell
believe
you're
that.
talking. What are you talking about? Because
well, let me just be.
we have the government for the people and of the people and by the people. Therefore, there's a response. Dude, just
Well, let me just be
summarize
clear.
this. What do you
Let,
mean?
let me just hold on. I just want to step in and ask. Like, it sounds like we're getting down a little bit of a rabbit hole of can we logically ground any kind of moral or imperative, any kind of ethical imperative for an individual or a society without grounding it in religion or faith? And to be fair, that's not really the conversation I wanted to have today. While that could be on another day be an interesting conversation, I think we can all agree, at least in the descriptive shared reality of there being some secular, non-religious, like moral weight that our society we live within has. Some belief in morality that even if it's utilitarian, like Counterpoints
No,
was saying.
I don't believe that.
You
Honestly,
may not. No, you
What
may
do you
not.
believe then, out of curiosity?
I
What
believe
what kind of government structure should we live under, if not a democracy?
you should live
Oh,
under.
I just want to be clear in my question. People do live that way, and we're not going to be able to have a productive conversation unless we can agree to act to some extent on a non-secular grounding for this.
Fair enough.
things.
So let's say this. I'll use non-secular argumentation for the entirety of the rest of this debate,
I mean
just in
secular.
order to get it to move forward. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to concede any ground in the beginning of it by saying that there's some type of moral responsibility that we have to anybody when nobody here has grounded any moral responsibility at all. We have one guy here who has said, hey, look, because you voted people in, you have a moral responsibility. We have something about communal responsibility, which is grounded pretty much in a feeling. Connor did a little bit of a good job trying to explain it a little as more than that, but it's not really. So when you're talking about secular ethics, it can mean anything. It can mean nothing.
Can I push back on that?
I'm willing to just do secular the rest of the time.
Quick. I would like to as well, real quick.
Yeah, I want to say there's three. It seems like there's three people, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to speak for you, Amy, but it seems like there's at least three people who are trying right now to give a more utilitarian justification for our responsibilities to others. So I'll put you down for a soft order here. I don't want to stick to it too much.
Yeah.
But looking at if I'm going to go off to the times, Amy's been a little bit behind in speaking time so far, so I'm going to give it to her to start.
What is the point of society? What is the point of living as individuals in a collective if we are here serving the interests of capital, working to maintain the bare necessities in our quest for betterments? Material conditions become the focal points of most of our personal agendas, and that makes us very selfish. But have we always been this collective of selfish individuals who are just keeping our heads down because we have our own bills to pay? Or is the point of a collective society intended to function for everyone's betterment based on what they are able to offer in terms of communal support to the entire society in which it functions. We don't necessarily even have a good moral framework from the perspective of a very broken, failed state and capitalist society that allows us to care as far as we can about those who are suffering or not doing so well or have fallen victim to, the failures of policy initiatives that either haven't gone far enough or simply don't exist. I don't like this idea of trying to argue from a philosophical perspective as to why you should give a shit about the unhoused, because it would be up to the state to offer the material conditions necessary for everyone to have the bare minimum. And that is simply not what we have. So when we put the question back onto the individual who is a member of society to ask what is the moral imperative for them to contribute what they have to those who are doing less than them or not as well as them, I think it's a really difficult, or maybe that is the point. It's not necessarily even about finding solutions to incredibly difficult social issues, but making an argument based on already faulty framework and a very slippery slope to begin with, because we are living in a fractured society that takes so much of our own energy and makes us focus on our own achievement for material betterment that we don't even have time to really care for other people. So of course it's going to be a difficult question about, like, what is the moral imperative? How can we even...
Madam, I'm not sure what the hell you just said. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I honestly have no idea what you just said. I'm taking notes. It was just like this long rambling prattle, and it didn't tell me anything. Do you think you could summarize it for me so that I can understand what you're talking? I literally have no idea what you're talking about. Did you follow it?
Your mic's flipping a little bit, Andrew.
Did anybody else follow that? Anybody?
Yes.
Like, be honest with me, Connor. Did you follow that?
It was a description of why our society's fucked up in the first place, but I didn't understand the secular grounding for why we should care about homeless people, besides the fact that our society is already fucked up and we should care.
I'm saying that it's a faulty premise to begin with, and I'm going to fail to contribute to this portion because I want to ask you a direct question.
Why? So for instance, like, I have a reason why I would say you should care about another human being from a secular lens, which is reciprocity. Basically meaning that I'm going to help you out a little bit, you're going to help me out a little bit when I need it, and as a result, we both get further together. And if I don't take care of you in your time of need, you might try to fuck me over in order to get what you need. So basically, looking after my neighbor is beneficial to me in the short term and in the long term. And if we make that a general social rule, then most people will do better long term. So I can couch from like a secular lens, like,
hey,
reciprocity.
I can understand that, man.
So I guess my question is, you're saying society's fucked up and we're not taking care of each other. So is reciprocity the base moral value? Do you think that human beings have some inherent worth? What is the motivation? Like, I heard your framework, but what's the motivation for your framework?
Because we don't live in a society that gives equal ground or footing to everyone.
But why is that
live
good?
It's not good, and that's the problem, that we are spread so thin, and at best we can offer some reciprocity or partake in mutual aid, for example, and that is the very nature of the issue, is that we have a state that caters to the interests of capital at the expense of the poor and people of color, and that's the foundation from which this country was built on. Our Constitution was written by slave owners, and
that doesn't have much to do with what I'm talking about. So let me be evil for a second. What I'm trying to be like, so I'm trying to illustrate to you why some people might not care. So, for instance, there are people who are social Darwinist. They think that people should, like most people who do good things will do well. Most people who do bad things will suffer. And sometimes people deserve that suffering because they're making choices. So they're not pure raw products of, like determinism. They're making choices that have good consequences and bad consequences. And if you remove the negative consequences from people, then there's no incentive not to make good choices. So, like, from a Christian perspective, like, there's a lot about compassion. There's a lot about taking care of your neighbor. There's a lot about giving them the shirt off your back and all that kind of stuff. But there's also a command to individuals who follow Christianity to live a better life and to avoid bad behaviors that inflict negative consequences on yourself and others. So, like, what I'm kind of hearing is, like, people are suffering and we need to take care of them. But a lot of people, either from a Christian framework or a social Darwinist framework, they would say they're suffering because of their own choices. Fuck them. And that's like, you might not like that argument, but it's a coherent framework.
Would anyone?
Hang on.
Again,
While computer is thinking, I can interact with that. If you need some time to process that.
No. I'm with you, but again, I am having a very difficult time in entertaining this moral framework because it is antithetical to what I believe is the root cause to poor behavior, crime, and that is separate from how we should, in theory, treat one another as members of a community. And,
but this is the framework of half of the country, so you should probably at least understand it.
I understand what you are saying in that we have should we have a moral obligation to treat members of our community with respect and decency and take after one another and look after our neighbors and offer some semblance of generosity to those who are within a similar communal position, right?
So what do you say in response? What do you say in response to perverse incentives? Like, do perverse incentives not exist? So, for instance, like, if somebody just wanted to do heroin all day and they didn't want to work and literally they didn't have anything, like no history of trauma, no history of abuse, nothing like that, they just enjoy drugs and they don't want to be productive, should we just give that person a house and basic income so they can sit in a home and do drugs?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because a fail son does it all day and no one cares. And no one cares. A fail son or daughter who is inheriting daddy's money, they do that all day, every day, and no one gives a shit because they are not considered stains on society because you don't have to see it. They didn't fall
we don't
short
have to
of
pick
any
up their
kind
mess.
of
Yeah,
Right.
because the society's not the one footing the bill in that circumstance. Their own parents, I think, would be.
And let me ask you a question.
So do you think it's just like if you win the genetic lottery, then you should be able to
How
be a
about I
fail son
offer a
daughter?
moral framework? Maybe I can offer a moral framework to bridge some of this stuff. So I would probably approach it from a bit of a utilitarian lens. So specifically, I would say broadly, when we improve the circumstances, even of the homeless heroin addict who just wants to use drugs all day and everything, if we provide them with certain basic needs, they're more likely to do less harm. So, for example, one big issue that comes out of lots of homelessness is increase in crime, typically to fund both habit, if there's addiction going on, and oftentimes because there's a lot less policing in certain areas like tent cities, right? So from a utilitarian standpoint alone, you could argue it is a moral good for society to caretake for these people and improve their station because it actually improves all of society at large. Like that is one framework that I guess I will offer for the group as a secular.
So I'll work within that framework if you guys, for the purpose of moving along the conversation, like I'm fine with working within a utilitarian framework. Of course, I could offer one back and say we could just reopen the subsidized mental health institutions that most of these people ended up going into, that progressives consequentially shut down throughout the entirety of the 20th century, and which is why we have people punching themselves in the face in the middle of the street while they're shooting up with heroin, which I'm sure my cop buddy Connor over here has probably seen some of that, haven't you, Connor? So the thing is like I could probably counter your utilitarian framework with my own, but I think we can just work within the confines of it. But I had a question for the gal to my left.
Well,
I was
hold
just
on.
curious. I was just curious about one thing. Well, hang on. I'm just curious about one thing, and then I'll shut the mic down. But inside your paradigm, you were saying a second ago that you do think that people ought to get universal housing and money and everything else, even if they are wanting to be a shitbag, and that's fine because the spoiled rich kid down the road, he gets taken care of and he can be a shitbag and nobody cares. I'm just curious how many of these people you have given any amount of wealth to or put up in your own house or done any of these types of things.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. If I may.
Sure,
You may.
And then we'll try to get back to Jebtan as well.
Because the answer is zero,
starting to fall
right?
a little bit back
Such
for
a
time.
waste
But
of a
you
question.
can,
Like
I'll give you a
it's
chance to
zero,
respond.
isn't it?
Zero, right?
I mean the amounts of money that I've contributed. I don't keep a dollar amount tab on the financial contributions that I've made throughout the years. I've engaged in plenty of instances of mutual aid, donating food, time. I used to volunteer in a unhoused all-male shelter for about a year, and I have learned.
No, I'm sorry. I think you misinterpreted what I was asking you. What I was asking you is how many singular
No.
individuals who are shitbags, who are on heroin and are
No.
mentally ill,
Now
have you
you're
personally,
shifting the
have you
question.
personally,
Well, you're moving the
No.
goalpost.
no, I'm
No.
not.
Hold
No, Erudite. Have you,
No,
this was
that's
her,
not
what
you were
she
being
said.
asked.
She said that
Yeah,
those
you're
people
moving the
deserved,
goalpost.
You're
she
shifting
said
things
that
around
those
to
people
try to
deserved,
fitter into your
she
perception of
said
a
that
your
those
quote
people
as well.
deserve to be subsidized by the state in their entirety, meaning free housing, free food, and money given to them. This was what Connor asked. I'm asking how many
That's-
individuals she's done that for.
That has nothing to do with the state because
Whether
I
it
think
does
that
or not, I'm still curious.
you're
Let-
making
let-
the assumption that I have enough
let-
material wealth to extend to another person, and I don't because I am not doing
Oh.
so hot financially. And in terms of the question in the way that it was asked, I think that everyone deserves access to the bare necessities because what I think is the bare necessities is access to healthcare, housing, education. Food sovereignty is incredibly important as well. And I believe that as a baseline, we are all deserving of these things. And if they were granted to us, then we would have the propensity to want to take care of ourselves. And then from that groundwork that we keep on going back to, we would have equitable outcomes that could bring us to the conversation of how we would live in society and interact with one another. And then that would be the question of how we would treat one another, in my opinion. And it's hard to get to that place and have a philosophical argument of how we should interact with one another as individual members of a community because, again, the system is so broken and so many people are suffering, not necessarily because they were moral or abject failures, but because in some cases, when you're given a bad hand in life and you fall into a cycle of poverty or despair, and there is no government intervention whatsoever to help you, it might be difficult to understand that there has been a lot of states sponsored violence and policies that have made it so it is incredibly difficult to get out of a cycle of poverty. And I don't think this is what the conversation is supposed to go back to. I understand that I'm supposed to look past this and make it more about the obligation of one person who was not experiencing homelessness and how we should help or to offer
I
our
wish we could keep
services
it
or
right here,
assistance
honestly.
to those
Yeah,
who
let
are.
me
Hold on,
jump in real quick.
So
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
let
ahead,
me
Jeb.
dive on
Go ahead,
it.
Jebtan, yeah.
There was a lot, right? So let's go back to that utilitarian framework. So one thing I want to caution the conversation to, right, is BPF, you said you would counter Erudite's utilitarian framework with your own, saying we should open up mental health facilities to assist the homeless that were open before. The issue is, what Erudite is proposing is the exact utilitarian framework that would charge us to open back up those mental health facilities. I think you're conflating direct solutions with the framework itself. What you're saying, I think you're assuming where we all want to go with this, incorrectly in some cases. And so you're saying our framework is off. I think Erudite's framework was exactly the framework that would lead you to the conclusion that we should bring back those mental health facilities. It is the utilitarian framework that by helping these homeless people in any way, any help that we can give them, is a net good to ourselves because it reduces it reduces the dysfunction in our society. It's not a different utilitarian framework that you proposed. It's the same utilitarian framework with a different manifestation as far as what we choose to do in policy. But at the end of the day, you're still agreeing that there is a utilitarian reason why we might want to open up those mental health facilities, which is that the idea of a tent city right outside your home reduces your quality of life, and so there's a utilitarian reason why you would want to do something about that.
Okay, did you want me to respond to that? Am I allowed to or no?
You are certainly allowed.
Okay,
Anyone
great.
is at this moment allowed to respond.
So I need you to understand something very specifically, which is that the reason that I offered a counter utilitarian framework is because utilitarianism doesn't mean anything. It operates off of what's called a hedonic calculi. Okay, a hedonic calculus. So
we can call it a secular framework. I think.
Okay, so anyway, the utilitarian framework operates off of a hedonic calculus. There's anything that you propose.
I don't want. Hang on. Hold on. I'm gonna let you respond. I'm just saying though, I'm making it clear because I don't want us to go to a rabbit hole, strawman each other forever. Like utilitarian, it doesn't even necessarily have to be utilitarian per se in a strict philosophical definition sense. What we're talking about is a secular, more materialist framework versus a religious framework. I just wanted to be clear that was the distinction that's trying to be made. Because it seems like we're looping around that.
I need you to understand the point that I'm trying to make, though, and this is important. What I'm saying is that the reason I said I can counter any utilitarian framework with any utilitarian framework is because you can't measure it very well. The hedonic calculus doesn't work. So you can basically use a utilitarian framework to make a case for anything that you want and say it's because it has the bestest outcomes on society, but it doesn't. No. It doesn't. Hold on, so hang on. So what I did was I said I'll just grant it. So what I did for the purpose of just allowing the conversation to go forward is just grant it.
But
I just granted it and said I'll just work with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you just spent like 5 minutes rolling back the granting. If you want to grant it, and we'll move fucking forward.
Yeah.
Okay, but I had to respond to what he was saying.
But you hold on, right? But when you say it just doesn't, well, hold on. This is super important though. When you say it just doesn't work, you have not demonstrated any reason why. What I'm saying is...
I did. I gave you the hedonic calculus. Do you know how the hedonic calculus works?
You just said the term.
Do you know who invented utilitarianism?
Let Jeb finish. Let Jeb finish. I want to hear something about other than hedonic calculus for a second. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeb.
And you didn't demonstrate any hedonic calculus. You just said the term hedonic calculus. What I'm saying is if your utilitarian framework that you countered with doesn't actually conflict with Erudite's utilitarian framework, which it doesn't, then you didn't counter with a different utilitarian framework. You just gave a possible policy prescription.
We lock all the homeless people up in prison because it gives the maximum societal outcome. Does that intersect with her utilitarian framework? Will that
no, because
work
those
for
individuals
you?
are part of society.
No, I think that they are part of society, but I think that the best way that we can take care of everybody for maximum outcomes is just to lock these people up. Tell me, give me within the hedonic calculus how I'm wrong. I can't wait to hear it.
Prisons are super expensive.
I'd like to let Notsoerudite respond because she hasn't.
I just literally don't want to. If you're going to grant that we can work within the secular utilitarian system, I would rather move forward.
I agree.
You're at the point where you're going to basically, if I say like empiricism and blah, 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 you're just going to like toss it out and be like, well, science is not really that real and stuff like that. So I'd rather just like
science is for lab coat nerds.
Lab coat losers and madams.
Right. So if we can agree that there is
that was funny.
I know. I'm funny.
So if we could agree that there is some secular materials, some non-religious, if we can at least agree on there's some non-religious utility or use to some extent to trying to make our society better, right? That we don't need to rely upon religious reasoning necessarily to try to produce better outcomes. I guess we'll then just maybe more strictly move on to where are we failing? Like what exactly are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? And how do we achieve those?
Can I kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so actually, I don't know if BPF was meaning or not, but I think that public hospitals or public places for the mentally unwell should come back. I think it was kind of like a social crime that we gutted these things back in the 1980s. I know there were a lot of criticisms of them because of abuse and because of like lack of care and all that kind of stuff. But I think that in an era of like better metrics and monitoring and cameras and all that kind of stuff, I think we can do a better job. And then on top of that, we can kind of strain out what we were talking about with Amy, where it's like, okay, are these people like incapable through no fault of their own, through virtue of birth or genetics or whatever? Are they incapable of becoming productive? Or were they fucked over by society, and as a result, they are now in a negative situation? And by taking the people out of the calculus who literally cannot care for themselves, who are genetically predisposed to certain diseases that are difficult to manage, giving them a safe place to live and receive medication and housing and all that kind of stuff, that kind of leaves the other people that you can try to meet halfway and say, hey, if you meet me halfway, we're going to get you ramped back up into society and help you be a productive, happy, healthy citizen. And then we can kind of avoid the financial arguments where it's like, are we just going to throw money after people who don't want it? And I'll leave it there.
So
Yeah.
I would like to maybe start by separating homeless population into a heterogeneous group, because there's going to be different needs for different groups. For example, I'm sure Amy can tell you even more about this than
Can
I
you
can.
tell me what heterogeny means? It's a big word.
Yes.
I don't
so
know.
You know when you have your favorite salad dressing and there's little chunks in it?
No, I don't eat salad. I'm a man. I eat meat.
Okay. You know when you have your favorite steak sauce and there's little bits of garlic in it?
Garlic steaks. Okay,
Can you at
we'll
least
go with
picture
garlic
it?
steak sauce. We'll do it
Can you at least
just for the
picture it?
sake of
Okay.
this.
Okay.
Okay.
That's called heterogeneous. There's different bits within it.
Okay. I think I understand. Go ahead.
Okay. So, for example, there's kind of oftentimes, let's start with two groups. There's more than two groups, but let's start with two really simple groups. There's one group that typically transitions in and out of housing, kind of back and forth. And it's typically a mixture of income. So we'll see oftentimes a lot of like refugees in these types of groups, recent immigrants, and people who've lost their job, and people impacted by things like inflation, stuff that Amy's pointed out, right? Typically, these individuals we see, they'll use homelessness services, for example, going to shelter, soup kitchens and stuff like that for a couple months at a time. They get on their resources, they get some level of housing, and then kind of things sometimes will either repeat and they'll fall back out of housing, or they maintain housing, and we see more of a slower. These ones typically spend less than a year in our homelessness like industry essentially, and they typically get some level of housing, and with social supports they often actually do pretty successfully. However, as I think Amy's putting out, as inflation and real estate is increasing, we're seeing an increasing number of these people transitioning in and out of homelessness. Now there is a separate group. This group is typically the types that like probably Counterpoints and I have more interacted with in like our work with homeless individuals. They're oftentimes very mentally ill. They have severe substance abuse issues. Oftentimes they also have very complex things of like lots of trauma histories, also are more engaged in like criminal activities to like fund their habit. And they're extremely difficult to maintain in housing because they relapse, they do criminal activities, so they get kicked out. And so there's just a lot. So there's two groups. Let's start with that.
Yeah, and one of the things you wrote in the prompt is, right, we have transitional housing and homeless shelters. Why don't they work? One of the things that we have to say, and it's part of that heterogeneous idea, is a good portion of the homeless community, right, is experiencing, and this is something Amy kind of points out too, when she says, which I don't agree with this premise, but when she says that a lot of times homeless people basically are dealing with the same issues that housed people are, but to a greater degree, she believes that is because of where they're born. I think it's about a great many factors, right? But there are homeless people who are homeless because they struggle with mental illness. There are homeless people who are homeless because they are, not making enough money. They don't know how to manage their money very well, and things like that. These are all problems that housed people also experienced. One of the issues with homeless shelters and transitional housing is those are solutions that only help homeless people. So once those homeless people are no longer homeless, they're not able to benefit from a homeless shelter or transitional housing. And so that contributes to that group that falls in and out of homelessness, because they get all this help until they have a home they can afford. Then they get into that home and they no longer get help because that stuff doesn't serve them. That is why when we're talking about a utilitarian framework that benefits everybody, greater mental health resources, possibly more financial literacy education in schools, things that will teach the general public how to better manage their budget, things that will contribute to the betterment of the general public's mental health, are going to help homeless people more because it's assistance that they have access to both when they're homeless and when they are just coming off of being homeless, so that they can stay housed. They can get into a home, get them, and still get the mental health care they need, and still have the financial literacy they need to not go back into homelessness.
So, I guess loosely speaking, though, I guess do we think that to a certain extent it seems that these, like, where are we failing, I guess, to meet those requirements, and do we think that that's the magic bullet? It's like, it seems to me that I don't know. I guess maybe we can agree on it, but it doesn't seem necessarily clear to me that addressing all of those things necessarily will solve the whole issue. So I guess my question to the panel would be, maybe we can all agree on that, but if we don't, what are the other things that are necessary to address the issue, and what are our difficulties in addressing those vectors as it stands?
Well, I think those specific things are some of our biggest failures. And while, again, a magic bullet does assume a homogenous homeless community, because a magic bullet only works against one community that magic bullet will work on with the same result every time. The reason why we have to attack this from multiple angles is because, like she says, it's a heterogeneous community. I think we should focus on getting the critical care for the people who really can't be helped, the people who, like they said, are just going to do drugs for the rest of their life, or are severely mental ill and aren't going to be able to care for themselves. That's one angle that's going to help that community, but it's not going to help the community that is bouncing in and out. So they can get there, they just can't stay there. That's where financial literacy in the public school system can help, because only 1 in 3 Americans keeps a written budget. Like, the fact that exists is insane, and we can help those people get and stay in housing by making them more financially literate and still giving them access to mental health care and giving them a jumping off point when they're homeless to get an ID, apply for WIC, apply for SNAP, and apply for the programs that are going to get them in a place where they're housed, but they're still getting some level of assistance to kind of push them into a safer area where they're not housed but just on the cusp, like 1 month away from being homeless again.
So I think a big issue in our homelessness services, so I'm not going to speak for America because I know that your guys' welfare state is a lot different and smaller than ours, but in Canada, when it comes to the individuals that transition in and out and are mostly homeless due to like life circumstances like income, Canada actually has really good resources for this. Pretty much everyone who wants to get off the streets can, and we have great housing for this. One thing I will say is one thing that Canada needs is more transitional and affordable housing. That's an issue. And we need to vet who's coming into us, because we bring a lot of people, for example, who are homeless because they have financial issues into the affordable housing. And sorry, my dog's going to freak out for 10 seconds, so I'll stop.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to apply a little socialism that way to get a good dog catcher, I guess.
True.
Yes. So I do wanted to ask this, since we're talking. What's that word you're using again? Heterogeneous. Heterogeneous. Within the confines of this heterogeneous homeless problem, can you speak to me about single motherhood and how much that affects the likelihood that you're going to end up becoming homeless? So we're talking about all the ways to treat the homeless, but what about if we're really talking about stopping homelessness? What about single motherhood, which is probably one of the largest contributing factors to it? Now, I don't know that for sure. I haven't looked at the studies. I just got a guess in my head, right?
Yeah, so that's really incorrect. Single mothers do not make up any, even close to a large margin of the homeless population. Almost
no,
all
they're
single
kids. They're kids.
Nor their kids. So the major predictors of homelessness is going to be specifically substance abuse, mental illness, unemployment, and then living commonly in poverty.
What are the rate of those things among single mothers?
Single mothers, typically they're going to have poverty.
Oh, okay. So and drug addiction's higher, right?
Not necessarily.
Yes, necessarily.
Okay.
Drug addiction is higher among single mothers. That's
sure
absurd to say anything otherwise. Of course it is.
So
drug addiction's higher. All of those head to whatever problems, the multifaceted problems that you have there, all of them apply to single moms, don't they? Not so, Erudite?
Yeah, she's trying to answer.
Yeah. So Not all of those apply super well to single motherhood. However, poverty absolutely does. Typically, unemployment doesn't apply. And then I would say mental illness is probably the next one that would apply the most strongly. And substance abuse is actually still going to be, when you're looking at substance abuse and single mothers, they're actually two small base populations. So the overlap is going to be smaller than you oftentimes expect, even though at a like a heuristical level, it might
Tell
seem
him to
apparent that
flex. Tell him to
they're
flex.
overconnected.
Tell him to flex. He's right there. Come on, come back and flex. Ah, damn it. All right.
Okay, so hold up. So can I take some bait, but also ask a pointed question?
Sure.
Yeah. So BPF, like, all right. So I'm with you. I support basically having two parents in the household and raising the kids, taking your parental responsibilities very seriously, all that kind of stuff. And I do think that society would be better if we did these things. But we often talk about like female responsibility when it comes to this. Are you willing to push on an individual level male responsibility where part of the promiscuity, it takes two to tango? Dudes basically want to get laid. They want to take advantage of a promiscuous culture. They don't want to take responsibility for the kids. We have delayed adolescence. Do we have a social responsibility to say, hey, like, yeah, sure, all this fucking funky promiscuous bullshit in the American culture, but dudes also have to take responsibility for their progeny, and they have to take responsibility for where they put their wieners.
Man, you got to love the sanity that comes out of Connor. It's like a breath of fresh air, right? Yeah, absolutely, Connor. Of course, men should be held responsible for what they do. But here's something that we should not forget, which is that women are the gatekeepers of sex. So while it's true that it takes two to tango, there's nobody on this panel who's going to even try to pretend, unless they're a complete idiot, that if a man went on the street corner with a sign that said, I want to have sex, and a woman went on the same street corner with a sign and they're the same attractiveness level, let's say, to the opposite sex that said, I want to have sex, which one's going to get laid first, Connor?
I guess.
But it does take two to tango to have a
okay, yeah,
single son,
we've already
right?
we've already established this, moderator. So
Well,
Connor,
you seem to be
Wait,
disagreeing
hold
on it right now.
So,
Well, no,
Connor,
wait.
so Connor,
Who
I
do
got to
think has
ask
more
you.
responsibility?
So
The
I'm gonna
woman who's gonna
ask
have to
you,
carry the
like,
child
which
for
one
9
do you
months
think? Which one do you
and
think,
raise
Connor?
it for 18
So
months.
I wasn't done,
with a man who
Notsoerudite.
can
Which
sleep
one,
with
Connor?
18 women
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a
I'm
month
talking,
and
Notsoerudite.
create
Which
18
one,
children.
Connor?
Sire,
Greater
Connor?
responsibility.
Sire,
Hold on, I want to hear. I want to hear what Notsoerudite has
Well,
to say.
we
She's
weren't
been
done.
we've been
But,
vastly.
but we weren't done.
she's-
Just let him answer the question. Which one, Connor?
Okay.
Hold on. Like everyone can go back and forth, but when multiple people start speaking up,
Yes.
the way I've run this panel, as I mentioned, is I'm going to start to refer to like the people who have not spoken. And in this case, Notsoerudite has been vastly disproportionately represented, so I'm going to
Awesome.
pass
That
it to
way
her.
we can never get a point out, can we?
I will.
We
will
can never,
also,
we can never
I'm
flesh
happened to
anything
sparring,
out.
BPF?
Hold on.
She's
Everyone, shut
sparring
the fuck
with
up
you.
for everyone. Shut the fuck up for 1 second. All right. I'm actually, I'm about to mute you, Andrew, because the thing is, like in this case, if you're going to start talking about not giving people a chance to get a point out, you literally like interrupted her point a second ago to tell her husband to flex. So I'm going to give her a little bit of speaking time now. And
Yeah,
you're
but that was an
basically
inside joke. You don't realize that.
no, I do realize that. I know better
No,
than you. I
you
just
don't,
don't
or you wouldn't have brought it up. So,
All right,
just
go
saying.
ahead,
All right.
Notsoerudite.
So, who has more responsibility, Andrew? The woman who has to carry the child for 9 months and raise it for 18 years, let's say she even has 7, or the man who can sleep with 18 different women in a month's time and create 18 single parented children?
Does anybody? Okay, so nobody else is speaking up. I can answer this.
I mean, I can if you want.
I think she's
I
asking
asked
you in this
directly.
case, but
I said
yeah.
Andrew.
Okay, so specifically, none of that addresses who the gatekeeper for sex is. So even if a man can go off and impregnate 18 different women, right? Women are the gatekeepers. So I'm going to ask you the same exact question, Notsoerudite, and I just want you to be honest with me because you already know the answer. If a moderately attractive male and a moderately attractive female both held a sign on the corner that said, I want to have sex right now, who's getting it first?
The woman is going to get it first.
That's
we're
right.
talking
What? But
about
why?
Single parent.
Hold on,
Oh,
Laura.
I can answer why. I can answer why.
I'm sure you can because it's
Yeah.
common sense, right?
Yeah, because
I'm sure-
because hold on, there are a lot of men that prescribe to the same idea as you that the level of responsibility a man needs to take over his sexual escapades is low, and so they're always gonna say yes because, like Erudite said, they don't have to carry the kid. Because women are only the gatekeepers of sex because men don't see that there is a lot of responsibility for them in a sexual experience.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life and counterintuitive.
Tell me why.
It's
Tell me why.
counterintuitive on its
Why?
face. So
Why?
hang on. They're only the gatekeepers of sex because men won't take care of their kids. Tell me how that logically
No, because
follows.
men won't
not what
say
he said,
no because they don't see a high level of responsibility. You're saying they're the
So they
gatekeepers.
won't take care of their kids.
What was the example that you just
Well,
gave?
what do you mean by high level of responsibility?
Because you just said the reason why the women are the gatekeepers of sex is because they will
Mm-hmm.
say no more often. Erudite just explained why they might say no more often, and it's because they innately understand the responsibility that sex entails because they're the ones who have to carry a child for 9 months. You are saying they're the gatekeepers of sex because they say no more often. I'm saying they might be the gatekeepers of sex because men say yes more often
And
because
you don't
they
think it-
don't carry that responsibility
you
with
don't
them.
wait. You don't think it might just have something to do with the primitive sex drive of men versus women and the fact that we have a high amount of testosterone?
Andrew, I don't.
And
I
that
don't
we
think
just
this
like
is,
to have sex a
I don't
lot?
think
Like, what are
this-
you talking about, man?
We're agreeing.
But I don't even
We're
think
agreeing.
this. I was about to say I don't even think this point negates your point. And the point that I was getting to is that we're foisting a lot of responsibility.
It's not that it negates anything. It's not a point of
Oh,
whether
what-
his point is negating anything. What I'm saying is, I'm trying to bring some common sense here and say,
but
look,
even if we concede the common sense, even if we concede the common sense,
so let's concede it
let
then.
Counterpoints respond. Yeah, Counterpoints. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So even if I concede the common sense, even if I was to play into every stereotype and social knowledge that we have accumulated over the years that men can like it's harder to get laid as a man than it is to be a woman, et cetera, who get all that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is that part of the cultural narrative is that we don't police men's sexuality. We police exclusively women's sexuality. And so what I'm saying is if we're responsible, like if we actually care about single motherhood, if we care about well-developed families, if we care about like masculine influence in the household, don't we also have to police masculine sexual responsibility?
So what you're saying on its face, again, makes no sense, Connor, because
I'm
when
literally
you say-
asking dudes to be responsible with their dicks. Why is that
but
wrong?
hang on, because
Connor's trying to appeal to your argument in the best
because what
way
you're saying,
right
no,
now.
he's
Like,
not.
I'm listening.
Moderator, I don't need you to try to tell me
you
what's
do
a
need,
logical
you do need me
argument or not.
to. You do need me to in this case because you're trying so hard to
I
disagree
need
with
you.
everyone.
I
Even
need
when they steal
you-
in your position, you still disagree with them.
No, you're wrong. What I'm going to say to Connor is a
Why
sound
don't we ask the
argument.
people that are trying to steal men your position?
Yeah,
I
so
don't
what
know,
I'm going to say to
do you-
Connor
do you-
back is a solid argument because I don't think you guys are understanding. So Connor, the courts rule in the favor of women most of the time, right? So how are you going to say that society is not making men responsible for their sexual activity? I don't understand that.
Well, if you can walk away and then just cut a woman a check, isn't that kind of like not more responsibility?
Well, I mean, maybe it depends, but the thing is that
These are still two different instances.
When you
We're never going to make progress if we're talking about this because this is literally like we're talking about
The
right
root
now.
of homelessness?
We're too down in the weeds because right now we're talking about the difference of like responsibility that we can ascribe between men of homelessness to either the groups of men or women when it comes to like fathers or mothers through the lens of like of single children. There's already several levels of analysis that this is separated through, and now we're talking about the wider scope of the way to which men and women are represented and protected in our society. That's way too far off.
We can go to
I agree.
policy.
So we shouldn't complicate it that much. So let's.
Yeah.
What I want to ask is I want to try to reground us here. All right. It seems like that we can agree descriptively, like inevitably, right? If we can agree,
Don't say that because BPF is going to immediately be ready.
I know, right? Well, if in BPF's words, if we agree that it takes two to tango, right? Then we don't need to have this wider conversation. It doesn't seem to me we need to have this wider conversation about exactly where the responsibility lies because we've already agreed that to some extent the responsibility already lies with both parties, and we're already admitting that it's not like necessarily the perfect lens or the best lens to look at homelessness through. I believe Notsoerudite earlier mentioned like how there's all sorts of other more predictive factors that we could predict homelessness better than necessarily coming from a single mother because there are all these other things that are correlative as opposed to causative. So that being said, I just want to reground us. And I want to propose a new question. What are the indicators of homelessness what are the problems that cause homelessness in these demographics which seem so difficult to address? Like people addicted to drugs, people suffering from mental illness.
Untreated mental illness with self-medication. That would be my most common experience would be people with untreated mental illness who use hard drugs, soft drugs, every kind of drug in order to compensate.
And then I would argue on top of that is the layer of we've got oftentimes mentally ill people using substances to self-medicate and then engaging in criminal type behaviors to facilitate and aid their oftentimes illicit substance abuse.
And I would add a slight tinge to it too, where if we are going to eventually get into policy prescriptions, they should also accommodate for the idea that mental illness may be exacerbated throughout being homelessness through things like sexual assault, which is, I think, if we're talking about ways to house homeless people, that's a big thing to deal with, and making sure that wherever we house homeless people, we increase the protections against sexual assault in those situations, because it's super rampant throughout homeless communities.
Okay, so I guess loosely speaking, like, if we can identify those sort of being the underlying issues, how do we address those? Like, how do we how do we fix these within homeless populations?
Well,
Like, what are the best vectors?
Yeah, so I worked in Florida, which is one of the most Darwinian states in the nation when it comes to homeless people. Literally, just like take them to jail, take them to the hospital. Who gives a shit? But even we figured out that actually providing medication to homeless folk is like cost effective, because if you give somebody who has schizophrenia like an antipsychotic, which costs only like a few dollars a month to administer either via shot or you're able to give them a prescription or something like that, it is literally like by a factor of 10 cheaper to give them their meds for free than it is to take them to the ER every other week or take them to jail every other week. So I think that there is an argument that can be made to fiscal conservatives and to social conservatives saying like, hey, I know you don't like giving people things unless they work for them, but literally from a fiscal and social perspective, our society is better if we do provide some base level of medication, access, and all that kind of stuff. Also, my father-in-law, he runs a faith-based 2-year rehabilitation center, and it literally is like the ramp back into the normal world because they get people sober. They're required to be sober. They're required to work the entire time. They're required to go to therapy together. They get dental work and medical work in order to get their health issues under control. And then they work to, after they handle all the physical stuff and the spiritual stuff and the emotional stuff, they reconnect them with family who might be the social support network that helps them to get sober, stay sober, get productive, be productive. So for me, these ramps and these drugs are not only are they cost effective, they do help. Yeah, they help human life flourish. And I wish we cared about that a little bit more.
Yeah. And then I think we should also be providing people, again, because one, this touches on the community that isn't helped as much by the mental health care side of things, which is like Erudite said, the community that is bouncing in and out of homelessness because of things outside of mental health. We need to be providing a certain level of financial literacy in schools, right? We give them health classes because we don't want them to start a family too early or get STDs too early that are tough to deal with. So we understand family planning is something important to teach kids in school. Well, I think family planning also comprises financial literacy. I personally come from a household that was part of that bouncing in and out community. And it is an underserved community because we so largely see the bigger population of homeless people being mentally ill and drug addicted. There's financial literacy will not only help the people in that smaller group, it'll also help homeless people who have gotten their mental health care, gotten off of drugs, and then gotten into a place where they're housed, because it'll give them the ability to continue keep that ball rolling and stay thriving. Because I'm sure, and Amy hasn't gotten a chance to talk yet, but she kind of hinted to the idea that it shouldn't be enough for people to just not be homeless. We should want them to thrive. And I think having at least one semester required as a graduation requirement in high school of financial literacy can help people so much, because that is what takes you from poverty on the edge of homelessness, but not quite homeless, to doing okay. That's it.
Okay.
I'd be curious actually to ask Amy specifically, because you were talking about like housing stuff specifically. And so this is something I don't know much about, which is that group that tends to transition in and out of housing back and forth, and it's more of like a financial security thing. I know a fair bit about the Canadian stuff, but it sounds like you have a fair bit of information on like the American side. So like what is going on in this group that typically is transferring in and out of housing, and it's dominantly going to be like a fiscal concern that's going on for them?
So in a privatized housing market, there is a lot of discrimination that landlords have against anyone who has a less than perfect record. And if there is a transitionary housing program that only offers bridge shelter for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and it then becomes time to find private housing outside of what the shelter services will offer, landlords are incredibly reluctant to offer a contract to anyone who has an eviction, a criminal history on their background check. And so that, in many ways, is the reason why you have a less than perfect uh, it ends up becoming a revolving door because of a less than perfect transitionary process that allows for individuals to temporarily receive the healthcare services, job uh, services, and other material needs that they would receive in the interim as they are working through that merit-based program. And that's because a lack of subsidized housing that landlords will participate in gives only a few options in many respects. So lack of public housing, lack of affordable housing, and uh, you know, in many respects, the services that are offered tend to come up short too, and that keeps a lot of people from being able to move into a supportive permanent housing model because we don't necessarily have those facilitate the process of outreach services working to really put together a well-funded transitory program that works because of the private interests that the public and services rely on. We rely heavily on private interests.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to pass it off because was the response to that? Or
I have 100%. So it's sort of leading off, right? And I think one of the things that's tough, and this is definitely, not might be, where I would probably disagree with Amy from what she was saying previously, is that I don't think the issue is the private interest, but I think the solution does entail the private interest, right? So one of the issues why landlords, right, they don't want to deal with people with evictions, they don't want to deal with people with criminal records and things like that. This is something that comes up a lot when we talk about Section 8 programs and why certain landlords just don't want to take Section 8, they don't want to be a part of the program. Is your likelihood of having a difficult tenant that causes damage to your property, that doesn't pay on time and things like that goes way up when you're in those kinds of programs. I think one of the issues with housing programs, especially in the United States, and this is coming from a family who went through a private charity for housing assistance that did things differently and what I think is a better way, is it doesn't coincide with education on how to be a better tenant and how to accommodate your landlord a little bit, how to manage your finances so that you can continue to pay rent. When we subsidize housing, it's the giving a man a fish versus teaching a man how to fish. We give them the experience of being able to afford rent for a period of time, but we don't teach them how to get to a position where they can afford rent for a longer period of time. I think if you're ever going to have a subsidized housing program, it has to coincide with an education program on what landlords are looking for and how to maintain your financial health.
So let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. I'm just curious. How do you teach really stupid people how to manage their finances? I'm just curious.
Oh,
like,
how
are you a really stupid person? And
I mean, I wouldn't consider myself like insane as far as intelligence, but I have written a lot of stuff on personal finance, on sales and things like that.
So how do you teach stupid people who are drug addicts? You want to teach them personal finance. Why don't you give me the step-by-step for how you teach an idiot personal finances? I want to hear
100%.
Are we talking about, I just want to be clear, like, let's separate whether or not we're inquiring into stupid people and whatever that definition would entail versus like addicts or people with mental health issues.
What is this? What is this? What do you mean?
Hold on,
What would
let's say- hold
stupid
on.
people entail?
Let's
We
say
know
they're
what
both.
stupid
Hold
people
on.
entails. Come on,
Okay,
man.
let's say they're both.
I don't think so.
Someone's super
mentally ill
confused. What is a
individuals.
stupid
Yeah.
person?
I
Well,
have
we've
Go ahead.
established
Hold on.
mentally ill
Go ahead,
people.
Notsoerudite.
We've also established people in transition who are typically in a fiscal issue, right? And now you're identifying IQ, or are you saying mentally ill people are stupid?
I'm not saying either of those things, and that's a bifurcation. What I asked this gentleman specifically is if what he's saying is one of the things that we need to do is we need to make sure that there's just more education. More education is going to solve the
stupid?
problem.
Who's
I
the
got you.
idiot? We're
I don't
asking
think
for
it's-
you to clarify.
agree
I'm
it's
sorry.
not
I'm sorry. How
irrelevant.
come when I get
let-
cut off, the moderator just sits there? I'm just
Because
curious.
I've been
You're the victim.
hold on, there's been a fair share of cutting off here, but the point is
I'm
the
just
reason
giving you shit, dude.
the reason well in this case then maybe the reason you're giving me shit might be because you recognize that you did use the word stupid, and so
Yeah.
that when you're saying specifically what you were trying to ask him, you were specifically asking a question about stupidity, which is why the
Yeah, but
clarification
did
is
you
being asked
notice,
for now.
moderator, that he tried to respond because he instantly knew exactly what I was talking about when I said the word stupid? So did you think that there was confusion there?
It's not so much that I think there's confusion. I think that
Okay,
others
then
on the
we're
panel-
done now.
you're
So
gonna
go
let me
ahead
finish.
and if
You're
you
gonna
can
let me finish.
respond
You're
to
gonna let me
stupid
finish. What happened was I think the other people on the panel might have suspected you of operating in bad faith or arguing badly or trying to obscure the argument, which is why they acted accordingly, which I'm not necessarily even going to accuse you of, not at this moment, but I think it's okay for other people to err on the side of caution when it comes to others doing so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
great. So I wanted to ask though, moderator, just out of blanket curiosity. So if he understands the word that I'm using and there's no confusion, how would that be bad faith?
Because you're making
Bad faith,
presumptions
because
about
the-
people with mental illness, and you're making presumptions about people with drug addiction issues. That
I
they're
didn't
stupid.
make-
But
I
there
didn't- hang
are.
on.
But there. Okay, hold
I
on.
didn't make those
But I was going to
presumptions, I
agree
just
with you.
asked-
Can I
yeah.
give the
Go
more
ahead.
charitably phrased thing? So I am with BPF in some level that I think that we should, or well, actually, I'm completely centrist on this. I think that we should have like educational, like, home economics, how to cook, how to clean, how to budget, all that kind of shit. But I think the more strong question is, once you teach people very simple skills like budgeting and cooking and cleaning and all that kind of stuff, at what point does that become their responsibility if they don't retain things? At what point does that become their responsibility if you've made the public attempt to get them educated and it's like, water over a fucking rock. It just doesn't go in,
Yeah, no, but I want to respond too, because I think despite the controversy of how he worded it, I think it's a super good question that BPF
Are you
asked.
sure it wasn't bad faith? Are you sure? Because the
I mean,
moderator was pretty confused
listen,
about that.
We'll never,
hold on,
we'll never get to really know because but it seems like
just giving you
everyone.
shit.
It seems
I'm just
like
giving you
everyone
shit.
was.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
just stalling. Okay, so you agree with me?
No.
Just to be clear,
Don't you know?
so
Don't you know the funnest thing about these panels is bantering with the moderator? Do you not know
Sometimes
this?
the funnest thing, if that's what you want, sometimes the funnest thing can be actually moving forward in the conversation.
Yeah,
So
the
in this case,
funnest
since Big Papa Fascist has basically agreed with me about what I'm moderating right now,
Yeah.
I would like to then move on to
The
Jeff.
funnest thing in a panel with me is to let me talk. Okay, I can stand by that.
And the
So
least fun part of this one, but go ahead.
okay, so and it's about to get even more heady, right? So you asked dumb people and mentally ill people. I understand their value in separating those two because in a lot of circumstances, right, you need different solutions for those two groups of people because some people are dumb, some people are mentally ill, and they require different things. In this circumstance, though, luckily, I have solutions that work for both. First solution, when you spend money, write down in an app, on your notes, or on a piece of paper what you spent and what you spent it on. Very simple, right? Even an idiot can understand that concept. Number two, debt is not a wealth building tool for the impoverished. People will shit on guys like Dave Ramsey because they will talk about, he says.
I was just going to ask if this was. It sounds like the Dave Ramsey approach. Are we stuffing envelopes, bro?
No, you're not stuffing envelopes. How do you disagree that you should be writing down what you spend and what you spend it on? Since you've interrupted me now.
Well, it was important to ask you because it sounded like the Dave Ramsey approach, and one of the criticisms of the Dave Ramsey approach is that stupid people can't do it.
No,
I'm
that's
just
not true.
saying.
No, that's actually not a really good example. I think Dave Ramsey's approach, the issue people have with it is because you get these intellectual finance degree holders that say, well, no, debt can be a wealth building tool. That's the issue. Dave Ramsey's approach, the issue with it is focused on stupid people. It is the best thing for stupid people. When you spend money, write down what you spent and what you spent it on. If you can download an app that helps you keep track of it, even easier because it'll put it in a pie chart. That, I promise you, will reduce people's spending the moment that they do it, because one of the biggest issues with people with leaky budgets is the fact that they don't have a budget and they're not aware of where their money is going. 2, understand that debt is not a wealth building tool for those that don't have the money to invest. Debt is only a wealth building tool if you can invest in a manner that increases the amount of capital that you have in a way that outpaces the interest rate of your debt. Impoverished people don't have that opportunity, so debt is not a wealth building tool for the impoverished. So for impoverished people, you don't need to be buying new cars on credit or old cars on credit, and you shouldn't be leaning on debt and credit cards to make your bills if you can avoid it. And if you have any financial prerogative when you are carrying debt, it is to pay off that debt. Those are simple concepts that can keep people in a lot better financial health than they are right now, that even the dumbest fucking people can understand. The second is don't job hop. Stay at your job, work the hours that you can, and move up in your corporate ladder in your job unless you have a specific directive as to why you are going to leave your job. Get a job, keep a job. You don't need to take out student loans to get a degree if you don't want to. Get a job and keep it. Don't use debt, and write down what you're spending. That, BPF, is what I would tell a stupid person that would, in an immeasurable way, improve their life.
You're muted.
You muted yourself, bud.
So hang on. I just want to make sure I got this right. When there's a market downturn and we have a labor shortage and you could go out and vie for any job that you want at a much higher wage, you would still advise them to stay at their job?
No, did I not mention if you have a specific prerogative as to why you're leaving your job, you can, but don't just get the itch and leave your job, right? Like if you're working at McDonald's.
It's nuanced, right?
Well, if you're working at McDonald's,
almost too nuanced for a stupid person to understand.
Not at all. Not at all. If a promotion is available,
not saying they need to understand. He's just saying they need to understand very basic things.
The reason I bring this up is because I don't think you understand what I mean by stupid.
Here's an idea.
So I'll tell you what stupid is. Stupid is a person who puts screws in packs all day. All right, that's all they can do. This is their function in life. They put screws in packs all day, and they put them on an assembly line. They go down the assembly line, right? Because they can't do anything else. Now, I'm going to tell you that there are that there are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people globally that are this way, right? And if you think for a second that stupidity and homeless don't match up well together, I've got a feeling that you're probably wrong. Just like I have a feeling that nobody brought up this entire time. They talked about all these different symptoms, but nobody brought up the family unit. Not a one of you brought up, what about familial relations? And the fact that if you come from a middle-class home and you have good support from a middle-class support network, the chances of you being homeless drastically decrease.
Because it's almost like when you're born into certain class systems, it's more likely that you're going to stay within those class systems, right?
And it's more likely if you're married.
Hold the fuck up. I'm not done. Okay. We also need to talk, if you want to go into the IQ conversation specifically, we can. Just to be clear, there's a big issue with a lot of people who are homeless. Yes, there is some correlation.
No, the IQ thing. I don't consider high IQ people to be smart.
Let her finish.
You're dumb. You're talking about IQ when you're saying that certain people cannot do more complex jobs. IQ is a predictor of the complexity that your cognitive power is.
Not a predictor of success, though.
Yes, it is. It literally is also a predictor of success in North America. Yes, it is. I can give you a million studies for it, but
it's one of the best arguments against Wignats. In fact, when you tell them that it's not, and you show them on a graph that it's not, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
I do.
Let her finish your thought real quick.
I do, and there is robust evidence for IQ's predictiveness.
It's robust.
Yes,
let her.
robust.
I'm gonna have to mute you.
More adjectives, not.
Yeah,
please go ahead. I'm gonna give you at least a minute and a half. Go ahead.
Okay. So if you're talking about IQ, there is a genuine issue that is arising in our society where we have an increasingly complex workforce that people with lower IQs and disabilities are having a difficult time navigating, because it's turning out that a lot of the more simple jobs that have more concrete roles to them are mostly being exported overseas, and they can't manage highly complex jobs. This is a thing that's actually being talked about when we're talking about disability care. This is why there's an argument for UBI, because as your IQ threshold for minimum IQ required function in society is increased, you're leaving more and more people behind. And your options are basically what? Dooming them to homelessness. That's going to be great for society. That's going to be great for crime rates. And that's going to be also super great for just overall life satisfaction of everyone. And so if we want to talk about IQ, we can, but you're also equating all drug addicted people as people with IQ problems. And I'm going to tell you, while there is some overlap, a better overlap is, for example, impulse control issues, like having a neurodevelopmental disorder like ADHD.
I'm sorry, am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you're unmuted. Yeah, you can respond now.
Oh, okay,
Just
great.
had a chance to talk.
So
Yeah.
Can we talk about the family unit and the indicator that brings for living a middle class lifestyle?
Not until you address my
Yes,
point.
I would love to actually.
Yeah, let's do that.
Please. Yeah, let's talk
What,
about
we
the
jumped away from
family unit.
IQ?
Yeah,
we
find
can, but you
so-
have to admit
so
that you're
she-
avoiding it because
no,
you
no,
don't
she
have any
frames-
data to corroborate
frames-
anything you're saying. So if
frames-
you want to
yeah.
obfuscate, you can pivot
Wait,
and you
I'm
can
sorry.
engage with Amy and go buck wild.
Okay,
But
I'm sorry. If you want to keep it right here, we can keep it right here. I'll leave it up to the moderator, but he keeps cutting me off for staying on shit for too long. So which thing do you want to do?
Cutting you off for cutting other people off. But no, what I
Oh,
like
she
we
just
can,
cut me off. You didn't cut her
we
off.
can
so
stick.
just
All right,
saying.
we can stick on this. There's been tons of cutting each other off, Andrew. Come on, stop whining. All right, so what I'm getting at, or so like what the question that people are trying to get at. I guess we can focus in on this. Andrew.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll give the floor to you. Like, you can have your position. What's been going back and forth has been an attempt to clarify your position or point out the obfuscation that you're making. So I guess I'll let the clarification be to you. Are you or are you not using dumb? Are you or are you not trying to group dumb and mentally ill, or dumb and
No.
so
this is part of the
so that's
strong.
fine. If that's not
That'd
it,
be
then
the
what
opposite
specific
point.
group you're talking about? I'm just
I'm
asking
trying-
you to be specific.
So I'm trying
like,
to, right? When I say the word dumb, I'm not talking about high or low IQ people. This is a straw man that Notsoerudite brought up for no particular reason. You saw her pivot right to IQ. There are what I call educated idiots. And what an educated idiot is somebody who's so fucking smart that they don't know anything. It's an incredible thing to see, but they seem to not have an ounce of common sense in their head. Clearly, anybody who argues with me that, hey, if we have good, strong family structures, that wasn't even brought up in this entire homeless argument, right? Not once by any of these robust intellectuals.
Okay, and you can bring that up, but just to be clear, when you said
why don't
idiot,
you
what
just frame my argument for me? Why don't you do that?
I'm
No,
just
actually,
trying to make sense because
can-
no one
can
can
I
understand what you're
respond?
saying.
No,
No,
can
I
I-
No,
can't-
everybody
I
can
can't
understand
Jeff,
what I'm
you
saying.
let me
It's
go!
fine.
No,
You're
listen,
lying.
I'm gonna
You're
let
lying.
Jeb. I'm gonna let you go, but I just want to point out
Connor,
that every
Connor
single
first,
time that
and then me.
sure, if you'd like to, I'll let.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah, because you have spoken more. Sorry, I was misreading the timers.
Yeah.
I will let Counterpoints go first. Amy, I am going to get you in there because I am aware that you haven't been speaking as much. I'm going to try to get it back around to the point you were trying to make. But I just want to be clear that I'm totally comfortable leveling that accusation when every time that someone has tried to steelman your position on the panel, you've completely gone out of your way to disagree with them.
I don't
So
think I know what
that's fair for
steelman
me to say.
means. I don't think you know what it means.
I-
Because you can't
I-
follow
Who gives a
basic
shit? Let me
argumentation,
just
bro.
ask
I'm
an
sorry.
interesting question.
I'm very comfortable with my definition of steelman. Jebtan, I'm going to let you go ahead.
Well, Jeb, can I please? Thank you.
Counterpoints, counterpoints. My bad.
Yeah, so BPF/Andrew, one of the interesting assertions, or perhaps the most interesting assertion that you made within the past 5 minutes, is that IQ doesn't necessarily predict success, and that you like to use this against ethno-nationalists in your argumentation because it disproves the fact that like people of different IQs or different correlative racial categories can't be compatible within a functioning society. So
the percentile's lower than you would think, essentially.
So can you like even if it's just like giving us something to Google, what is the evidence that you use
Just Google
for
IQ. Just Google IQ and success as an indicator, and you'll
Okay.
see the percentages. That's it. I mean, what do you want me to do? I didn't come with IQ studies on a debate about homelessness because I didn't
Yeah.
think it was all that relevant. When I
Okay,
say
now
the
I
word
know.
when I say the word stupid, okay, I'm not referencing people who are necessarily low IQ. Some of those are the smartest motherfuckers I ever met. They can do things that are absolutely incredible with their hands and other things, right? What I'm referencing are idiots. Now, you guys want me to define an idiot. I can do that for you, or a stupid person, I can do that for you, unless you're just willing to grant me that you intuitively understand what I'm talking
Yeah.
about so we can move it forward.
Yeah,
Like
and that's what I
Mr. Red
wanna
Hat
do.
Good Faith over here.
I want to do that, right? So one thing, I can understand where they're coming from in that IQ does actually really directly correspond to a lot of different job titles that tend to make a lot more money than the job titles that low IQ like correlates with. What I understand about what you're saying is that of the educated idiot idea. I like that, right? Because I like to fancy myself as an uneducated smart person, the opposite of that community. Whereas like I wanted to thrive without a degree, and so I tried to do that. The reason why I think people have brought it up, Notsoerudite really did directly talk about the single motherhood and the family unit thing, and I can understand that with my personal experience being in a house with a single mother. The reason why I'm not so interested in bringing it up specifically, or bringing up too many individual circumstances resulting in homelessness specifically, like trying to paint out what their household looked like, what their history looks like, and all that, is because I think the most productive solutions are solutions that work for a multitude of sources of homelessness. I think that financial literacy can help the kid who just grew up in a single parent household as much as it can help the one that grew up in a dual parent household. That's, I think, why we're not getting into the weeds as far as like the single motherhood thing, which is while we agree that having only one provider in the home might make it tougher to thrive in this world, we also agree that whatever solution you have needs to serve more than just that community, because something that is notorious in the United States is the fact that our welfare programs do target specifically single mother households. And in fact, the perfect welfare household in America, when you're looking at all of the data, is a single mom with 2 kids. So I think where we need to expand is social programs that benefit people with single mothers, but also people from a bunch of different other backgrounds. Yeah, I got you. That's it.
Sure.
Okay. So,
all right. So,
well,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I just share real quick? So I did look up the IQ, correlation with like success or whatever. And what I saw was that IQ can't be a predictor for success, achievement, all that kind of stuff. But they did find a lot of high IQ people who basically didn't achieve anything in life.
Because they were mentally ill, right?
Yeah,
they were mentally ill.
Well, it was also like lack of support
first.
structure, like lack of self-esteem, lack of self-confidence.
But there's so much robust evidence, though, Connor. You got to understand the evidence is robust. It's adjective laced, so it must be true.
Well, I think there is robust evidence that IQ. I think IQ correlates. Like I think there is robust evidence that IQ does correlate
for some fields.
Okay, but I appreciate your insight to make it more nuanced. Thank you for being so charitable, Andrew. I love you.
I thought I was being very charitable, but I have a mob against me, so I have to be a little bit assertive.
Counterpoints, did you get your point out?
Yeah. Basically that IQ is indicative of success in work and school and academia, and it correlates with all of these things. But there are personality traits that can take away from this, and if you let those personality traits consume you, then they can fuck you over. And I think that's something worth mentioning, not specifically in this conversation, but more with the ethno-nationalist debates where we're trying to say that IQ is the end-all, be-all of human worth. I think that's where pointing these factors out is very valuable.
Yeah, I want to disagree with someone who isn't Big Papa Fascist.
Grab some water.
I want to ask a question to Amy, because I think we might disagree here, and it might give you a chance to jump in. Do you think that financial literacy in the public school system is something that would make a big dent, a substantial dent, or is something that should be a substantial policy goal in reducing homelessness?
I think that it would be fine to add it to the core curriculum, but I don't think it's going to make a difference in the reality of our workforce and housing market. I think that you can be as financially literate as you can be, and you can still fall flat to the realities of a unstable economy, an unfettered capitalist real estate market, and there's really having the tools to know how to maneuver or navigate through an unfettered capitalist workplace and housing market will help you stay on your feet, I suppose. But in terms of what it will do to help you better manage your monthly budget, I'm not so sure that it's going to keep people from experiencing the effects of displacement through being priced out, through having stagnated wages that don't keep up with the cost of living, specifically housing, year over year. But
What's
it
your
might
number
give them,
one prescription policy wise? I just want to know because I'm curious.
in terms of what would be the best preventative measure to reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness every year?
Yeah, and it can be a framework like top 3. I just want to hear more from you as to like from your perspective what the best attack vector is for homelessness.
I am a proponent. I'm a proponent of the housing first model, which is offering housing, no strings attached, in addition to the additional services that would be necessary, whether it be healthcare, whether it be job services, whether it be anything that would help facilitate the process of ensuring that anyone experiencing homelessness would be moving to not just transitory housing, but long-term stable housing that would help them reorient themselves back into society. And
Could I maybe bridge between you guys? Because I would disagree with Jeb about financial literacy, about like being that like a really important prescription. But I have some questions about the housing first. So, a really big issue that I know often arises when you're providing homes without giving kind of the critical care for mental health issues, and kind of getting on top of that is that oftentimes the homes that they do get placed into get absolutely destroyed and trashed. So you're having to pay constant refixing fees. And another issue is that oftentimes they put these houses all together in like one core area. And so you see a massive escalation of crime and like violent behavior in that area because you have people with addictions. So their drug dealers are coming around, then there might be warring gangs. And so there's like all these complex things that happen. So in the housing first, because I'll be honest, I don't know much about this prescription. How do you guys navigate, for example, like these bad actor individuals who would necessarily want to take advantage and ruin that system?
So with housing first, it would be a different approach to kind of avoiding the possibilities of what we tend to see in carceral housing or temporary housing, where those who feel as though they are a hop, skip, and a jump away from a jail cell, they don't necessarily give too much attention to the way that they are living. With permanent supportive housing, it's given a lot of there's a lot of good feedback that we have seen from even states in the United States who have seen success, where if you offer individuals and families long-term stable housing along with the critical care that they would need, that includes the addiction services, healthcare, then you see a different response to how unhoused people treat their surroundings. And it's not all in one concentrated area like you see in New York's homeless services model. And when you are offering that stability, that doesn't leave the unhoused wondering how long are they going to be there? How far are these services going to take me? Is this only going to be temporary? What is the point of cooperating with this merit-based program? It shifts the
Census.
attention back to what will I need to do to continue to help me thrive? I now
Right.
have stable housing. I have the support I need. I have the job.
Substances.
So, to give you maybe a bit of my background, I actually worked for 2 years at a addiction center for women and children, so they could bring their children on site. Typically, the women were originally homeless or incarcerated. They came and they could live for up to 2 years on site. Now, this was a unique situation as it was a rehab center, so there was a couple of stipulations. So, a really big thing for a lot of these housing things that we get into tricky things is stipulations about when you can stay in housing and when you get kicked out. So, for example, based on liability and genuine also concern, if we had somebody relapse in the household, regardless of whether we wanted to do like some sort of preventative care, because we also have children on sites, our accreditation required us to remove that individual and send them back to, for example, like basically like 7-day detox. And then we know exactly where they're going after the 7-day detox, right? So this was a really big issue that we came across. And this was in a home that had 24/7 care and was offering individual therapy, group therapy, and like all of the good stuff. And so how does the Housing First navigate that issue?
Housing First would have a completely different response to the bridge shelter or transitory shelter program where everything's kind of on site. Typically, we see, I guess, depending on where you are, you might have one facility that offers housing kind of in a 5/1 style development that offers clinical care, access to food and resources, but that's really the extension of the public housing model that's available in places like, say, Vienna, where that infrastructure already exists, and in some cases, you can take advantage of the existing infrastructure that kind of has multiple services available that makes it easier to treat the individual moving through the Housing First model. But basically, you would have a case manager, and you would have your social services, you would have access to transportation. And so with the Housing First model, it doesn't necessarily require or even ends up being the case because of the way that our built environment has a lot of different type of zoning, kind of separating, you know, our commercial spaces and, you know, industry from our residential spaces. So in the case of Housing First, you would be given access to public transit to help you get to work or to the job services that would help you find a, you know, part-time or full-time employment, for example. And
Couple
the
sentences.
access to the services that you would need would be facilitated through your case management or your
I guess I'm
caseworker.
still wondering, like, what do you do with, for example, like bad actors? Like the reality of anyone who's worked with homeless populations, for example, like what you're outlining here is very similar to where my husband grew up. So my husband grew up in a homeless shelter. His dad was a power engineer on site. So it had kind of all those levels. And then a couple of blocks away in kind of like different areas that had different levels of transition based on like sobriety and stability that people had achieved. But a really, really big issue is that you always have individuals who are typically going to be really high in antisocial personality disorder, who are absolutely actively interested in both victimizing certain homeless populations and also utilizing these systems that are intended to help for their benefit. And then how do you navigate, for example, like sexual? So this is an issue that came up in our home. What do you do when you've got sexual assault, right? How do you navigate that? We had to kick the client out for obvious reasons, right? And press charges and everything. However, that client also inevitably ended up being homeless again. But what else do we do in that situation?
I think that's a matter of rehabilitation that's kind of outside of the scope of what the Housing First model would be kind of responsible for. I think you would have to offer a safe space to everyone who is not violating the rules or the norms, and that's just what tends to happen if you are taking away the safety that others feel because you are experiencing some sort of abnormality or you are failing to, you know, uh, maintain or comply with existing rules and standards. That goes outside of the scope, I think, of what the Housing First model attempts to achieve whenever you are actively allowing somebody to bring more chaos into an environment that is even devoted to helping, healing, rehabilitating, and uh, reorienting people back into society. I
I
think that
don't
you would
mean
have
I don't
to.
mean to cut you off, but I had a $50 super chat that told me literally, would you please cut this woman off because nobody can literally. I can't understand the
I'm
things
gonna
that you're saying.
Amy, I'm gonna give you an
Not
extra
your
30
panel.
seconds to yeah, I'm gonna give you an extra 30 seconds
It's
to finish up.
it's the
Go
question.
ahead.
I mean, in terms of what you would do to you would I don't know. It kind of seems like a weird kind of gotcha question, but you would remove them. You just wouldn't. You might not have the infrastructure that in a perfect world you would have a special process that would move anyone who was in violation of the policies to a place where they would have access to rehabilitation. Or I just we don't have a good example of how that would be done because we only have a few examples of housing first here in the United States, and then housing first in European cities and countries, they honestly offer no strings attached housing. They allow people to use, they allow people to exist without having to work. There are no work requirements. And so in terms of how I would handle it, if I were the administrator of a housing first model, I would have a completely separate HR slash, well, not HR because it's a horrible choice of words. I would have a completely separate facility that would move to put people through rehabilitative services if they are unable to really comply with the policies that would have to be necessary to ensure that everyone is acting in good faith.
Yeah.
If that makes, I mean, I just think that that just make the most sense? I kind of feel like this is a weird,
No, I got it. I understand. I totally understand the struggle you're having with this question. And I think it's the problem I run into a lot when I talk about financial literacy, which is we do have to accept, and it's the shittiest thing to have to accept in this conversation. We have to accept there are people who don't want to be helped, that will not be helped, and maybe even can't be helped. And what you're describing in these other countries is they basically have a solution that doesn't help these people. It just removes them from the public eye or from being a public nuisance. And in the United States, our versions of that is what Connor was saying, which was throw them in jail or throw them in a hospital on a 5150 or 5250 to get them off the street for a little while. And what you're saying is these other countries have a longer term solution in making these people no longer public nuisances. I agree that this is such a difficult question, and it's why I hold tight
I'm
to...
begging everyone, please get concise. Please, 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 fucking please.
You got 30 seconds left, Jeb,
Basically, I think we need to accept in this conversation there is a large group of people that might even comprise more than half of the homeless community that might not want to be helped and might not be helped, and we have to decide whether we just want to move them out of the public eye so that they're not a problem anymore, or if we accept that they're just going to be homeless in a tent city. It's a question, not an assertion.
Well, okay, so if I could just kind of add a little bit here, this is the cruel reality of the world that we live in, is that there are times that you have to say no, there are times that you have to prosecute, there are times that you have to incarcerate, there are times that you have to medicate, there are times so this is where, for me, dealing with leftoids who are like, well, we'll have perfect material conditions and we won't need cops and we'll have all the medication dialed in and we'll have all this, like, nah, like there's still going to be people who fall through the cracks, and at some points you're going to have to do some shit that you don't like. Even if we brought back the public hospitals, which everybody's like, ooh, public hospitals, wouldn't that be nice? Putting people in a place that's safe and warm and has food and bed and all that kind of stuff. What that really is going to be is it's going to be nurses, nurse practitioners, doctors, and psychiatric folk wrestling people to take their medication, and then them, like, on occasion fist fighting people with very severe problems. Working with disabled folk, like intellectually, emotionally, physically disabled folk, in a facility, a private facility that was exclusively for rich people. Literally half of their stuff was just trying to get folks through the day, and then the other half was unfortunately literally physically wrestling them to try to get them to not hurt themselves or others. So it fucking sucks, but it's better than the alternative, which is leaving them on the street to either be preyed upon by other people or to have those violent altercations on the street. So you're going to have to get used to some, I'll wrap it up, but you got to get used to some blood and some shit and some fighting and some fucked up emotions. And if you can't deal with that, then you're not serious about the problem.
Yeah, and it's a part of having these conversations because you have to understand that the conservative point of view is kind of hyper-focused on this community. And one thing I'll say that differentiates us real quick from other countries, Amy, is we have 320 million people, and we have a nursing shortage. So creating a facility that can do what Connor was talking about in every state or even in every community, which is what you would need to do, kind of unfeasible. Nurses, we have a nursing shortage, not just because they're underpaid, but because they don't want to deal with this shit. They don't want to get hit. They don't want to get screamed at. And my girlfriend's a nurse. She's experienced it all. They're going to. They're going to get hit. They're going to get screamed at. They're going to get shit on. They're going to get spit on. They're going to get blood on them. And none of us want nurses to have to go through that.
So it doesn't sound like I just want to be clear. Are we it sounds like to some extent we'd probably be. You guys are welcome to disagree. I'm assuming to some extent we would be welcome for there being some type of professional that can handle things like this. So I like.
But are you
it sounds
ready?
like Connor's proposed. Yeah, Connor's proposed a public hospital. I guess what I'm asking, what I'd like to point, unless maybe we try to take up the tent city topic specifically with what little bit of time we have left. I guess what I'd like to bounce off of Connor to ask is that, like, do we think that public hospitals are a solution to this? Do we think that the right solution? Do we think they're an imperfect solution? Or
I do. I think they're an imperfect solution, but I also think that like Americans are going to have to get a better stomach. And what I mean by that is like in the 70s and 80s, we had like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We had like a bunch of public reports about how people are being neglected or beaten by staff or anything like that. And this actually led to, along with a fiscal conservative bent, for us to defund and eliminate the public hospital system, where Ronald Reagan basically just turned these people loose and said they're better off loose than they are in the public hospital system. Well, this has been a fucking nightmare for most people for a really long time. But what I'm saying is, if you think that a public mental hospital system is viable and that there are some people who need to be basically 24/7 monitored, medicated, housed, all that kind of stuff, it is going to improve a lot of our societal problems, but there are going to be fucked up situations. Staff and people are going to get into fights. There are going to be people who are on the wrong meds. There are going to be people who basically they die in the hospitals because they have improperly diagnosed physical issues along with their mental issues. So, does the United States want to continue to see the horror of tent cities and homeless people in public spaces, or do we want to nut up a little bit and basically advocate for something that's better, but it's still gross and disgusting?
Yeah, so I guess I'll ask the panel, like, it seems like the underlying implication there is a question of, like, are allowing the homeless to congregate, as inevitable as it seems in some situations, in encampments in 10 cities, is this necessarily a worse alternative to perhaps public hospitals? Or perhaps forcing them into some type of mental health care, these people, or addiction centers, these people that we have difficulty reaching. Is that necessarily a better alternative to homeless encampments? Like,
I'm sorry, I think the reason why I'm having a hard time answering these questions is because we are assuming that if we're not giving them the basic care on a consistent level, that there would still be, and we need to focus our attention on those who would be kind of deviating from the norm if they were given the housing they need, the healthcare they need, the mental services that they need, the addiction treatment that they need. And I think it's hard to argue from a place of good faith, because we don't necessarily even know, we can't even properly gauge how many people we're talking about if we were offering those services and they were part of a public model that...
I think what we're saying is...
Yeah, but Amy, don't we have to work from where we're at? Don't we have to work from where we're at?
We're not working from where we're at, though.
Yeah,
we are
that's what we're doing, is we're working from where we're at.
Let her
this
finish.
This is all incredibly hypothetical, and we're talking about how to, of course, from a risk management perspective, I would say, how to put an additional supplemental program in place for those who would not necessarily move through the channels of a housing first model, for example, and who would inevitably maybe lead to some issues if they were not following protocol, for example. But how many are we talking about?
Now you can say that you would implement the one. How can you say we can implement this one thing, even though we don't know all of the details about the homeless numbers, all of this, et cetera, et cetera?
All of
but
these
then say, but we can't speculate on the. Well, hang on. I was quiet for a long while there. I just want to finish the engagement.
Although some people might be surprised to say it, particularly Big Papa Fascist, he has actually fallen down quite a lot in representations. I'm going to give him a chance to pipe in here.
Well, I appreciate that, moderator. So I got to ask you, Amy, how can you say that you want these specific programs right now, but then whenever Connor offers up an alternative like public hospitals, you say, I don't think that we're operating from a framework in which we can really discuss these things because we don't know all of the other factors. It's like, what are you talking about?
It sounds as though the public hospital model would be in response to, it kind of seemed as though it was going from offering public hospitals in lieu of allowing for homeless encampments to exist. And
no, he's making a both and proposition.
Can I expand, please? Yeah, so as we've already discussed like multiple times, Erudite elucidated this earlier, that these groups are heterogeneous, meaning that there are going to be people who can't take care of themselves, and there's just people who need a ramp back into society. So, for instance, if you were saying there was like we can do a housing first program where we basically meet people's material conditions so they can ramp back up into society and then become active, healthy, happy members of society, that's going to be preferred over the what I'm talking about, the public hospital model. But what I would say, what a lot of concerns are for people who have worked with these demographics before, is that when you talk about housing first or whatever, all of these negative externalities about like people who can't take care of themselves, or they destroy the property, or they hurt other people, what do you do with these folks? Incarceration doesn't seem like a good solution, so the public hospital to me would seem like a good alternative if they are literally incapable of taking care of themselves and not being violent to others or not destroying property. So that to me is where it's like, this isn't a one or the other. This is a cohesive solution.
Yeah, and I wanted
Curious,
to.
I was going to just
So
ask
it's both
Amy-
and, right?
I
It's
was
both
just going to
and.
ask Amy, do you, because we might be having a fundamental like kind of reality difference that's going on between different people. Do you believe that there are individuals, for example, like kind of regardless of what you provide them, they're still going to need basically like they might act as bad actors, so like take advantage of other people and act cruelly, or may still like be fully requiring others to help take care of them?
If you're
I think
asking that
that
question to me, the answer is yes, unequivocally.
I was asking Amy, yeah.
Cool.
I don't see the productivity in making those assumptions that of course there's always going to be bad faith actors and they might cause a little bit of chaos, I guess, but it seems counterproductive to make those assertions based on all material needs, all health related needs to be met, and then from that position argue that of course there's going to be the possibility that those who are coming into these programs are not going to be taking their program seriously, they're not going to be following protocol, and there would need to be an alternative for them to not cause any potential stir in the housing model.
Yeah, the reason why it's productive is because if we create the perfect solution for those that can be helped, those that can't be helped, if they exist, will continue to exist. And voters in a democracy are going to have an issue if their taxes go up and the expenses of the government go up for this great program for those that can be helped, but those who can't be helped are still in a tent city at the base of their apartment building. And that's, I think, where Counterpoints is trying to get. And what you said earlier is, why are we assuming people are like this? When if we give them the right care, they might not be. What Connor is trying to say and what Erudite's trying to say through their experience is the process of getting them that help includes nurses being attacked, shit on, spit on, patients dying, getting on the wrong medication, because it's a very hectic environment, and that is something that we can't avoid. We can't avoid the reality that giving them the care is going to include some nasty shit.
Well, I'm
particularly if
extending
it's
that
publicly
beyond
funded.
that. Right. I'm also saying, for example, there are going to be individuals that you provide all of these things for example, housing, security, treatment for their mental illnesses, treatment for their addiction, substance issues. You get them into really good support networks. You get them connected to like some sort of like community program, churches, something like that. So they have all of this underneath them, and then they still relapse, and then they still treat their kids abusively. They still fall into some level of a drug addiction. Like those individuals do exist.
In every country, Amy, that's what I was trying to say earlier, is some countries may have a better framework for getting those people out of the public eye, but we have to accept with whatever solution we give, we're not going to cure homelessness. We're going to treat it just like anything else.
Yeah, and if I can say, like, this is what I was talking about with, like, the public stomach, okay? So right now, Americans they don't have to have a stomach for any of this shit, because they can just step over the homeless guy, throw him $1, say, fuck it, like, who gives a shit about this guy or whatever. Or I'll give a couple of bucks to the church, and they'll do, like, a soup kitchen or like a rehab, like kind of like my father-in-law, the program he runs, which is it'll get some people off the street, but it's not like a systemic response. So you don't have to have any kind of collective responsibility. This actually circles all the way back to the beginning of the conversation where do we have a collective responsibility? Well, collective responsibility comes with facing the ugly things that you have to do when you're assuming responsibility, which does include like all of these negative things that we associate with law enforcement, with medical intervention, with psychiatrists, all that kind of stuff. So are you ready for that? Because that's what it's going to involve is misdiagnosis, death, violence, fighting, underpaid workers not doing what they're supposed to do, probably some bed sores from people who are bedridden, not getting taken care of properly, like all this heinous shit that right now we just get to ignore because we say, oh, there's 50 dudes or 50 guys and gals who are mentally ill and homeless staying in the woods over there. As long as they don't fuck with you, who cares? Like that's what we're doing right now. So we kind of just externalized all of the ugliness onto them. Are we ready to take the ugliness on ourselves? My answer is no. Like personally, I'm ready to go. I think most people are not ready for that.
Yeah, and I agree. That's why my people often see my solution as inadequate because it doesn't really address the people that can't be helped. But I think financial literacy and mental health care are the two attack vectors that help the highest percentage of the homeless community that can be helped. And as far as those who can't be helped, I agree with Connor. I might be ready for the reality of it because I've been exposed to it, but I don't think America's going to vote based on that reality, ever.
So this is why, and we'll probably start wrapping up here in a moment, but this is why we sort of wandered into this second subject, and I think Counterpoints has really been getting at that here, which is that, like, it seems to me at least, which is that this is the reason I make the connection, is that if we can admit on some descriptive reality of there being a subset of the homeless population that you exist in this uniquely difficult space to access and to care for and to alleviate their conditions. And if we can admit that as a result, like even in a best case scenario, there might be some inevitability of things like tent cities. And I think there's some people working with these groups that can speak to the inevitability of that demographic, right? If we can admit that there's some inevitability of that demographic resulting in homeless encampments and tent communities, then the question becomes like, well, what do we do with these? Do we break them up? Do we allow them to exist? Where do we allow them to exist? And that's sort of what Counterpoints is getting at, because it seems to me like, and that's why I make the connection, which is that it sounds like public hospitals is basically being proposed as an alternative. And that seems to me to directly connect to the topic of to what extent should we regulate police, disband the homeless. So I guess the question I would pass then is that is this the solution? And whether or not it is, what are our responsibilities to the homeless? Do we police them? Do we break up tent cities? Where do we regulate them to? And is it with police towards state hospitals?
Yeah.
And if there's no political will for it, what do we do in the meantime?
How do you guys feel about forced rehab? Like forcing people to get rehab. Let's assume in this hypothetical, the rehab is great, but it is forced.
As long as there's a criminal charge, I think is where I would.
Can we do that? If we concede that we will do rehab like this, can we do it with other things besides just drugs? Can we do it with like sexual preferences and things like that as well? Would that be okay with you, Notsoerudite?
I feel like this is a really big obfuscation from where we're going to. It feels like you're just trying to like.
I don't care what you feel like. I'm asking you a specific question.
Like, this doesn't really seem helpful.
It feels like I don't. No, it's not a switch because it would logically follow if you're willing to force people for one behavior that society considers to be morally reprehensible or they don't like it.
Me that being LGBTQ makes you exceedingly more.
Did I say anything about LGBTQ? Did I say a word about LGBTQ?
Yeah, I mean, sexual preferences.
And what does that have to do?
I
did not say the word LGBTQ.
Hold on. All right, send him to rehab for being straight.
You know that's where it's at.
Yeah, sexual preferences, like these are basically analogous in this context.
I'm sorry. When no, they're not analogous. You don't know what you're talking about.
But yes, I do. Hold on. LGBT. No, you can't. No, you can't.
Because can I answer her question?
Because you're not. No, I just want to clear this up. Because I'm not having it. All right. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about distributing time evenly if you're gonna just factually tell me things that are wrong. And when the panel tries to correct you on it, you disagree, and then when the moderator tries to call you out on it, you still disagree. All right, LGBTQ. If you're talking about people's sexual preferences, you can't say it has nothing to do with LGBTQ.
He could be talking about pedophiles.
No, you need to logically, since you're the moderator and you're a genius, not that I've moderated literally way more debates than you've ever seen in your life, but tell me something.
Maybe you could learn a few things.
Tell me something, moderator. Why is it necessary that it applies to LGBTQ when I say sexual preferences? I gotta hear this.
Andrew.
Got to.
No,
Connor. No, he needs to answer. He needs to answer.
Can we just mute him and move on because like this is just so.
Why? Well, I don't understand.
Because everyone, I know Connor's trying to be good faith, but we know he's not really talking about pedophiles necessarily.
Yeah, and can I, if you want to continue BPF, I just want to answer her question beforehand, and then you can go on.
Well, this is ridiculous. So what you're saying is that the alternative point's not even allowed.
Jeb, I'm gonna Jeb. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Quick.
I don't know.
I've had time to think about it because of an interruption, and you know what? I think as long as we criminalize drugs, forced rehab should be an option because it's so much more preferable to throwing them in jail for it. So yeah, I think forced rehab for drug offenses, if you go to a tent city and someone's in possession of paraphernalia and that's illegal, you should absolutely send them to rehab, not jail. So yes, I like that idea.
Well, okay, so let me ask the next logical question, because incarceration is already expensive, but I'm sure like high quality rehabilitation is also probably more expensive. Mm-hmm. So how many shots does somebody get? And I think the reason why I would have answered no to your question about whether or not forced rehab should be a thing is because, like, you know, part of the frustration from a conservative standpoint is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Most people who want to get better, like they generally speaking, they have to have that impulse first before they're going to follow you down the other things. So can you offer it as an alternative to incarceration and say, hey, if you get your shit straight, we got a program for you? Sure. But like forced where you're like, nah, fuck you, you're going to rehab. I don't know. Like I think there has to be some buy-in.
You can go to jail or you can go to rehab, like because it's less forced, but it's like let's be honest, it's not like a super.
But that's the question is, do you? So for instance, like let's say we give somebody 3 shots at rehab before we say fuck you, you're going to jail. Then basically at taxpayer expense, what you're saying is, do you want to go talk about your feelings with a bunch of other people who are trying to get their shit together, or do you want to go to the place where you're going to get beat up and possibly raped? And so the answer is going to be rehab every single time.
I think that...
I will just infuse some information. Forced rehab in addiction specifically, at least, is actually decently efficacious. It seems to be about the same as voluntary. Now, I will be clear here. There's a really big issue in addiction in that even if somebody successfully completes, for example, 6 months, there's still like a 60 to 70% chance of relapse because we know that addiction treatment in and of itself is decently ineffective. And so the forced rehab is really interesting because we know right now it's decently efficacious, but maybe that's only because addiction treatment is so ineffective at this point because it seems to be some neurological thing that we're not counteracting.
Well, and and that's what I wanted to touch on when you mentioned like the expense was, I would imagine, and obviously I don't have the information on hand, and someone could counter this, but I would imagine the recidivism through the rehab program might be less than the recidivism from throwing them in jail, especially in terms of like if they're going in jail because they were in a tent city and they had drugs. I would imagine recidivism for that is pretty high. So I think the expense still may end up net lower. Because, like she was saying, I think the rehab would create less repeat offenders. And when we're talking about perverse incentives, I think this creates the opposite. It creates a really positive incentive where, it's a no-brainer to pick rehab over jail. So you would get more people in rehab to at least take the shot.
Yeah, I'm okay with all of this. The thing that I'm not okay with or whatever is basically like, so for instance, you just brought up recidivism and you also brought up relapse. You know, I smoked tobacco for a really long time of my life.
Based.
I smoked between 15 and 25.
Sorry, I interrupted. I'm going to get muted.
When I became 25, I was like, do I want lung cancer in my 40s? Do I want to die of emphysema? Do I want to die, choking on my own bullshit like in my 70s or 80s? And the answer was no. So it actually took me about 3 or 4 times in order to quit. So my point is, if you had gotten me to quit, if you had done the patches, if you had done all that shit, but I had no intentions of quitting, I'm gonna I'm going to snap right back the second I'm out of the program. Whereas, whereas where I actually wanted to quit or whatever, I haven't had a cigarette since 2012. So, we're talking about 10 years of, non-recidivizing. Although I will have a cigarette when I'm 80 if I live that long.
Yeah, I think part of that is, though, that like cigarettes are considered one of those like vices as opposed to addictions to a lot of people. And you quitting cigarettes, right, took you a few tries, but you weren't in like a program where you were getting therapy to help you explore the reasons why you might smoke and your triggers to wanting to smoke again.
Fucking bad though. Like it was so bad. Like
that's what I'm
not
saying.
gonna lie. Like tobacco addiction is fucking up there for sure.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying is like it's just as bad, but I don't think I don't think quitting on your own is as effective as quitting through rehab because people have that therapeutic support through rehab that you might not have had through smoking because obviously no one goes to a therapeutic rehab program. I would assume more people would have an easier time quitting smoking if they did go to some therapeutic rehab for it, but that's not really how we deal with it societally because the perceived harm is lower. So I think the therapeutic rehab recidivism, to get to your point, would be a little more effective than just them trying to stop smoking meth on their own.
Might I interject again and just ask because I'm okay. It's like you're shaking your head, so if you don't want me to ask, I won't ask.
No, I nodded. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Can we get back to this idea of forced rehab? Because I want to know if Notsoerudite thinks that we can force rehabilitation on different behaviors. If she thinks that that's okay. Okay, and would that include sexual behaviors?
So yeah, that's where I assume you were going. So what we see from the evidence is that forced rehab in addiction specifically seems to be pretty efficacious. We actually haven't done many forced rehabs on any other thing. For example, you could look at conversion therapy, though. Lots of kids typically were forced.
Well, what about
into
sex
conversion
addicts?
therapy.
Just sex addicts. Who cares about LGBTQ?
I'm going to focus on conversion therapy because that's another good example of more or less a forced form of therapy. Conversion therapy is deeply ineffective. In general, there's no effective.
I'm not asking about conversion therapy, though.
Preferences.
Not literally not asking about it. Has nothing to do with my point. So I'm asking you specifically. I'm asking you about a specific type.
Andrew, I will give you an opportunity to ask another follow-up question if you would like.
She's going off the rails. I want her to answer to this question. I don't care about conversion therapy. Literally,
you asked a lot of questions, and now I'm trying to answer them, and then you're getting upsetty spaghetti
because you're not speaking to what I'm asking. So I'm talking about sex addicts. Sex addicts. Say the word back to me. Sex addict.
So
that's what I'm asking about.
Isn't the same thing as sex
addict. So she just won't answer. What's sex addict? Say it back.
Trying to answer.
The thing is, what she's trying to point out is that it's difficult for her to give one answer.
Don't need your help, moderator. Don't need your help. I just need her to say sex addict.
You do need my help because right now we're looping. All right, so I'm gonna unloop this fucking ball of snakes. I'm gonna point out that if you keep slightly changing the question when you reiterate it, then they're never going to get a.
No, that's called it's called a clarification. It's called a clarification. That's what it's called. So I'm just going to ask again. Sexual addiction, specifically, what I'm talking about.
So not sexual preference, to be clear. That's not what you're talking about.
Is that not a type of sexual preference, or can be?
No, it's an addiction.
They're different things. Sexual addiction is not a sexual preference.
You can't. Okay, fine, fair enough. So we'll just leave out the preference and we'll just go with sexual addiction. Should we force people to get rehab for sexual addiction?
Well, it would depend. Is forced rehab effective on treating sexual addiction?
Well, I don't know. Is it?
I don't know. We don't have the studies on it.
Okay, but would it logically follow that if you were putting people in drug rehabilitation and you say that drug rehabilitation actually is very helpful to these people, and so you're forcing drug rehabilitation, and sex addiction therapy is helpful to sex addicts, I'm sure you think it is, that forcing them also would be logically, right?
So if you want to get into addiction literature, the idea of sex addiction specifically is still really argued because behavioral addictions are going to be mapping onto like brain circuits really differently than like drug addictions. And so what we do see, for example, is that behavioral addictions, for example, seem to actually be less treated than drug addictions by the same addictive treatment measures. So contingency management is a common way that we treat drug addictions. And there's less evidence that behavioral addictions are actually addressed by this, right? And so this would be the measure of, okay, well, if this is working for this, why would we be forcing it if it doesn't map on properly to, for example,
Got it.
sex addiction.
So let's say hypothetically that you did have data in front of you that said that sex addiction therapy was highly, highly effective, just like you do for drug addiction therapy. Would you be okay with forcing? Would you be
I
okay
did
with?
say it's highly effective, just to be clear.
You didn't say that drug addiction therapy and treatment is effective?
No, I said that it's as effective as forced. However, the issue is that could be because forced is just effective, or the issue is that because relapse is so high that it's possible that nothing's really working.
Okay,
Because
but are you
relapse,
for forced therapy or
at this
forced
point,
drug
yes.
treatment?
Yes,
Okay,
because
great.
it seems to be equally as efficacious.
Great.
However,
Okay.
if things changed, I would change my position.
Oh, okay. So if the data proved out to be effective for sex addiction, would you prescribe that you were forced to go in and get therapy for that as well, or treatment for that as well?
So if sex addiction therapy is as effective, would I require people to get forced sex addiction?
Yeah.
No,
Why not?
because typically drug addictions have a different impact societally than sex addicts do.
Well, yeah, I know they have a different one, but that doesn't mean that it's not just as damning to society to have
Very
sex
rarely,
addiction.
right? So the
But
issue is that sex addiction is very rarely correlated with criminal behavior, like selling and moving drugs.
Wait, well, wait. So it's only because of criminal behavior? What about what it's doing to the
yeah,
individual and society at large? It's
BPF.
not
That's
just
what
about
she's.
criminality,
But
right?
hold on. You gotta listen
I
to what she
don't
said.
need you to come in. I would like to just finish this with her.
I know
I've
you
let
don't.
everybody
I don't
talk
need
forever,
you to.
dude.
I don't need you to. Need
I've
me
let
to.
everybody talk. Let me just
I'm
finish the
coming
line
in.
of inquiry.
I
Can I
know.
finish the line of inquiry?
I've got something
Notsoerudite
to.
is welcome to try to respond, but if she doesn't respond, just to let you know, BPF, the way I work this is like other people can respond. You can ask a question, and to someone else can chime in. If both people try to chime in, though, I'm going to defer to the person who's been speaking the least. So Jeb's welcome to step in. Although Notsoerudite, if you had something to say, you're also welcome to because you haven't been speaking that much.
With the argument that was going on, I would need Andrew to restate the question.
So it sounds to me like a logical contradiction is the problem, right? So you're saying that on this one hand, you would require that addicts be forced to get treatment for their addiction, but on the other hand, on this other end, you wouldn't. And your only appeal for that, if the data proved out to say that it was highly effective, is only that you think that the impact on society is lessened via criminality.
Right. So I already outlined my framework as utilitarian in this, so it's not contradictory.
Yeah,
If
so I
for-
have a
no,
utilitarian
I
sheet
gotta
right
answer.
here.
I gotta answer. You gotta
Yeah,
let me answer.
go ahead.
Okay.
Sure.
So, for example, it seems at a utilitarian standpoint, drug addiction has a much more vast impact on
Seems.
societal, yes, based on
Everything
criminality.
seems.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
based on research. So, drug addictions seem to have a much bigger proportion of, for example, driving crimes and also being the source of crimes. For example, 60 to 70% of most assaults occur while somebody's also on drugs. 60 to 70% of assaults don't occur when somebody is gambling. That is the major difference. So, at a utilitarian standpoint, it is beneficial to force individuals who seem basically their options are jail or rehab to go to rehab to decrease criminality overall. Then I would say for sex addicts who aren't doing a crime.
But criminality is linked to sex addiction, by the way.
Where?
But
So I'm just curious if that's the metric.
Well, you're saying
why it is, what degree
where's your
to,
source for that?
well, I'm
where's your
asking you,
source for that?
well, let's assume for a second it's true. Let's just assume it, just to test the logic. We're going to assume for a second that it's true. Okay.
Right.
So if
So
it
sex
were
addiction
true,
was predictive of crime for some other reason, yes, I would also be for forcing them into rehab.
okay, gotcha. I just wanted that clarified because, by the way, it is. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, the thing I was trying to point out was this whole like if and when and what, it wasn't that important because Erudite specified when we were kind of going back and forth with Counterpoints and me about it was offered as an alternative to jail, and she even restated it when she was responding to you. So I don't think she'd have a problem if someone was in jail for a sexual assault charge because they were sex addicted with offering them sex addiction rehab as an alternative.
I just want to point out that you reframe the arguments of
Nope.
every woman on this panel.
Didn't
I don't know why
reframe.
you do that.
Didn't
It's
reframe.
bizarre.
Feminist.
No,
You
I didn't reframe
like what
it
they
all.
really are saying, what they mean is, it's like they can talk, man. I'm talking to her. I know what she's saying. I don't need your help, Red Hat.
We'll let Jeb do his best to interpret, and if the women on the panel, the one that's remaining, would like to clarify, she is absolutely welcome to.
And the thing is, the issue is that I'm actually not reinterpreting or reframing. I am pointing out what you didn't listen to when you were interjecting. She didn't say something like offered as an alternative to rehab or to jail. She said offered as an alternative to jail. She's not looking at criminality, and we're not looking at criminality as.
Well, thank you for telling me what she said, even though I heard it. I appreciate that.
But then why did you
Thank
ask
God.
a question that didn't accommodate?
Because it did accommodate.
Hold on.
Which is how I was able to test the logic.
Hold on.
You see.
Well, no, but the thing is, you weren't testing logic.
Yeah, I was, and that's why she changed her answer so it wasn't contradictory.
If it's
you understand?
If it's offered as an alternative to BPF, if it is offered as an alternative to jail, wouldn't the implicit condition be that the person had committed a crime as a result of an addiction?
Sorry, sir. Go ahead. I muted you so Jeff could finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I constantly get muted. There's no sparring whatsoever allowed on this panel.
Just answer the question.
I'm sorry.
If you're doing it way more than everyone else, and you're doing it in a way that stops the conversation from progressing forward,
cares who's sparring more?
I care.
I'm the only one with an alternative view. Of course, I'm going to spar more. What are you talking about? Now,
your definition. You've defined sparring as interjecting and going back and forth in a very specific way. It's different from just having a conversation.
Now, moderator, really?
Apparently, because you.
Is there anything else you want to find before we're allowed to engage about it?
Okay.
Did anyone? Or go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask him the question again. So if we're conceding again that I wasn't reframing an argument, I was restating what you admit that you heard, which was that we were talking about rehab as an alternative to jail. Would that not necessitate that the person had committed a crime as a result of an addiction in that circumstance? Yes or no?
I'm sorry. Phrase it one more time for me.
If someone is being offered rehab for an addiction as an alternative to jail, would we not be, in that circumstance, necessitating that they had committed a crime previously?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. That's why I'm saying you weren't testing the logic of what she was saying.
No, you're wrong. I was testing the logic. No, because it has to be consistent why you would send them there. You understand?
And what I'm saying is it was already implicitly consistent.
No, it was not implicitly consistent.
Can you let me finish?
Explain why. I'm muted. I'm just going to start muting him every time he finishes his point. I don't know.
I'm not looking for whether you believe it was implicitly consistent. I am pointing out the implicit consistency, which is the necessity that they had committed a crime as the result of an addiction. So we're not asking if we found out that sex addiction resulted in crime, because in this circumstance, we are conceding that the person had committed a crime as a result of an addiction, so you would not need to deal with it any different way, as long as you said from the get-go, which Erudite did and we all did, which is that this person had committed a crime as a result of their addiction, and that is why they are being offered rehab as an alternative for jail. That is the consistency that is implicit.
Yeah. Okay. So now, moderator, this is going to require just a tiny amount of exchange so I can flesh this out and get him to understand my point here.
We'll see how I'm feeling.
Now, do murderers go to jail? Would you force a murderer to go to jail?
Yes.
Okay. Would you force a meth addict to go to jail?
Not if they had rehab as an alternative.
Okay. Let's say they didn't. Would you?
If they committed a crime, yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So if they committed a crime. So now, if you were to say, I would send him to jail for this crime, but I wouldn't send him to jail for this crime, then it's appropriate for me to ask why you wouldn't do that, right? Why your standard would be different between these two crimes. That's how you test logic. Do you understand that?
The entire utilitarian system is based around harm. So these are the differences in the sex addiction question.
Yeah, I know, and we've literally had to argue it on a utilitarian.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I hate to even do this, but go ahead.
I walked you down it, right? You asked me all the questions about sex addiction. And then you said, well, what if you know that sex addiction does harm? And I said, then yes, because harm is the differentiation between sex addiction and drug addiction. In the case of drug addiction, there are more likely people to be harmed if the person maintains their drug habit. And we have very solid data to suggest this. For example, as I said, 60 to 70% of most crimes are done while individuals are intoxicated.
Go
These
ahead.
people go. I'm sorry, I was addressing my chat for a second. So just so the panel knows, somebody was asking me, why do you interrupt so much? I'm like, well, I have to, or I get muted in 15 seconds if I even make a point. So utilitarianism is not based around harm. Where did you come up with the idea that utilitarianism is based around harm?
So the idea why it would be based around harm is the entire
It's based around
premise-
utility, right?
Okay. Yes. What do you think?
And
is
so
utility?
whatever you consider to be maximum utility is what it's based around, not harm, right?
So typically, utilitarian aims to make max benefits for most people possible.
Well, that's
Read
not
about it.
harm. That's
Hold
not
on.
harm.
Hold on. Okay.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is harm because if somebody is having lots of harm done to them or doing lots of harm to other, that is negatively impacting the well-being of everyone around them.
Oh,
Lack
but it's
of
not.
harm.
Oh, wait,
lack
I'm
of
sorry.
harm- No, I'm sure you'd agree.
But-
Lack of
No.
harm is a benefit.
No, I
correct?
don't agree. Lack of harm's not always a benefit, is it? That's not a true statement, is it? Not
Oh my god, I'm about to fight you, bud, just on fucking principle. What do you think utilitarianism fucking does? It's supposed to be the most amount of good for most
Whatever
people.
you decide, utilitarianism is based just around whatever you consider maximum utility to be. Doesn't
Sure.
have to be harm. It can be whatever the fuck you want it to be, and then you insert utils and you make a societal-wide prescription. This is what Bentham offered up, by the way.
Do you think
The
that
guy who
like,
invented
most,
utilitarianism.
Do you think that most people, like most people of common sense, try to use like good or like healthy or happy as the utils, and probably
can,
like death,
but no, I don't think
destruction, and
most.
harm?
I don't think most utilitarians use harm as a standard. Of course not.
Okay,
Why would they? I think most like midwits might do that because that's all
they
that
care
they can
more about
claim it
utility.
as.
Yeah, they care more about utility than they care about harm, quote unquote. Okay. I
Well,
fucking
it
get-
depends on what the utility is.
Okay, I get you.
It can
but
be whatever
we're
you
dealing.
want.
You and I both know we're dealing with fucking leftoids. So leftoids are gonna frame it within harm and fucking good.
Which is
and
why I
bad
did not
and-
want to agree to the framework of the conversation.
So
I only
my
did to move it
utilitarian
along.
framework-
And so now we say, well, why are you disagreeing, BPF? It's because I don't even agree with the framework of what she's saying for
You don't-
utility.
Okay, so do you
I'm
want
gonna-
the most
But
amount of good for
that's-
the most amount of people?
Disagreeing with my frame, just to be clear, disagreeing with my framework isn't the same thing as my framework being inconsistent. Originally, you were trying to imply that my framework was inconsistent. It's not. You just don't like my framework, which is fine, by the way. But that's not what's happening.
When did I imply it was? I only
because-
implied inconsistency in your logic, not your moral framework.
The logic comes from the framework that I'm
No,
using.
your logic comes from
Yes, it
logic, and it
does.
didn't come from your moral framework.
No, you need to have moral frame. This is the whole point that we stand.
Yeah, but I was testing your logic,
Moral
not your
framework-
morals.
Yes, but
I wasn't.
moral
I was not
frameworks
testing your
typically-
morals.
Hold on.
Moral
But-
frameworks stamp the line of logic that people engage in. So if my moral framework is that I would like to maximize happiness, well-being, and lack of harm in a utilitarian sense, that's
Yeah.
my framework of logic I'm going to argue. Now you started asking
Wait,
about
that's
sex
not a
addicts,
framework for
and
your
you said that it
logic.
is-
What are you talking about? What do you mean?
How
It's
isn't
a
it?
framework
We're
for your logic?
We're like, this is the argument. This is the argument. I know it might be difficult to track, but like, this is the argument. Okay, we're having
I can't wait to hear it.
we're having this broad sweeping conversation, and then we're talking about underlying logic, which takes us the underlying logic and justification for our positions, which takes us into our frameworks. And then you questioned when she provided a framework, you questioned the details of her framework and implied that that was the inconsistency.
Well, sir,
there's
can I ask
some
you a
type.
question?
Hold on, there's some degree. I'm wrapping this up. There's some degree of logical. There's some degree. I'm going to let you guys go back and forth just for one more minute. We're going to wrap this up towards closing statements. But you are like, this is exactly why I'm muting you, Big Papa Fascist, is because we're not going to move forward if we can't agree on simple things like that you were implying an inconsistency in the logic contained within the justification for her moral framework.
Yeah,
You can't
so
say
didn't imply-
That's
said
actually
it's
my question.
inconsistent.
That's actually my
It's
question.
true.
So what do you
hang
not
on,
like?
moderator?
What do you
Moderator,
not
are there
like about the
rules?
framework?
Well, are there rules for logic, moderator?
Are there rules for logic?
Yes.
Listen, I'm not going to get in here trying
Yes.
on a
Well, because
epistemological
The answer is
baseline.
yes.
well, the moderator, this is important because
Yes,
if there's
there are
rules for
rules for
logic, if there's
Are you
rules for
talking about
logic, then your
deductive or
framework.
inductive
Hang on,
arguments?
your
Which-
frameworks.
Which
hang on.
form of logic? I'm going to the basics with you, buddy.
These fucking
Are you
people.
talking about
Just stop.
deductive logic? Hold
Are
on.
you gonna let me finish?
Are you talking about
Hold on,
deductive logic or inductive logic?
What do you mean, bro? I was finishing. She
Okay,
cut me off.
No,
What do you
I'm
mean?
saying, I'm trying to get everyone to listen to me. All right, Big Papa Fascist, I'm going to let you ask your question, but I'm going to hold you to the wording of your question. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Great. If there's rules to logic, do your moral frameworks have to operate within the rules of logic? Let's just say modern logic. If you want to use, let's just modern logic.
Yeah.
Does
Yes.
your moral framework? Okay, great. So then,
if you say something that's logically inconsistent, it would test both your logic and I guess your moral framework. So I don't even understand what the problem is here. I can test you logically on any of
Right.
these things.
All right, well, I'm just going to wrap up the panel by pointing out that that's a good reason why it wouldn't make any sense for anyone to come in and quibble over distinguishing them and making an issue of it.
Well,
So-
it does make sense because if I'm
So
operating from
what
a
you
different
just
moral
said,
frame,
you just
if
said
I'm-
you shouldn't do is what you did, and it makes sense to do it.
No,
Well,
you don't even know what you're talking about. What I said was, if my moral framework,
you're not saying anything.
if my
You're not saying
moral
anything.
framework is different than your guys's, okay, which it is, and her moral framework is different than mine, the very first thing I tried to do was set down and establish the difference in our moral framework so we could actually have an argument within the bounds of logic. You shut that down,
Right.
moderator.
Okay,
No,
let's move it.
no, because this is what happened. This is what happened. All right. What happened
shut
was
it
we were
down.
trying to have that conversation. We were trying to get to that conversation where we actually have the conversation about the logic. Instead of having the conversation about the logic, you falsely implied an inconsistency. And then when
Well,
not
the
so
logic was
and then when not so right. But when someone said when someone said that you said
I
that the
think your
logic
mind
was
is blown,
inconsistent.
bro.
Hold on.
I think
Let
your
me
mind is
answer.
blown.
Holy shit. I'm going to mute you. When someone said that you said that the logic was inconsistent, your response, do you remember what your response was? Your response was, no, I'm talking about your moral framework. Or sorry, it might have been the reverse, where they said, oh, you're talking about my moral framework. No, I'm talking about the logic. This is like, these are the distinctions that you're making that are stopping the conversation from being able to move forward. Everyone else is trying to have the logical conversation, but you can't agree on just simple terms. Every single time someone says anything, presents any kind of logic, you're using the terminology to try to move definitions around in a way that makes it impossible for the conversation to actually move forward. You're the one quibbling over terms and moving the goalposts so that no one else can actually engage with your ideas.
Yeah, and let's.
You're unmuted. I'm going to let you. I'm just going to let him respond because I'm not that much of an asshole. But go ahead. Go ahead, Andrew. Before we go to closing statements.
I think I broke your brain, bro. you freaked out for
the dam.
freaked out
So
for like
glad we
50
allowed the
minutes,
space
dude.
for that response. I'm
But
so
anyway, so just to dive in, I'm just going to tell you again. Did I not try to establish at the beginning of this the parameters for my morality versus the rest of the panels so that we could have a productive conversation within the bounds and the framework of logic? Did I not try to do that? Yes or no?
No.
No.
Honestly,
So
no, but
lie more, bro. Lie more.
That's just my opinion as the
Lie
moderator.
more.
I'm going to go mask off here at the end because we're
lie
going to go
more.
to closing statements.
Yeah,
we're
do that.
already run a little bit over. We've already run over time. I appreciate all of you showing up, even Andrew, although I think he has been untenable throughout the course of this conversation. I appreciate your guys' time. Man, was this the conversation that I was looking to have? We didn't really get so much into 10 cities. I think that although we did have a little bit of productivity in the end, it seems that we basically, loosely speaking, all seem to have agreed that some form of public hospital, public rehab or something like that is good as long as you are trying to reduce harm. So maybe we can go on into our lives contending over whether or not it's like worthwhile to try to reduce harm in our society. But that being said, we're gonna go to closing statements, and I'm gonna see if I can get Amy in here. Big Papa Fascist, you will be pleased to know that it's going to be you last in the turn order. So maybe that makes up for the underrepresentation you felt you have had today. But we're going to go back around, reverse turn order. So we're going to start with Notsoerudite.
Okay. Well, counterpoints, as always. Thank you for being I think you're center right, correct?
Yeah, that's typically how I identify. Everybody pushes me all over the fucking place.
Yeah, I know. I really appreciate you being able to just engage well and have good faith conversations. I think in this panel, we have unfortunately only been able to establish that conservatives like BPF are victim playing soy losers whose lack of physical activity has left their frail bodies so full of soy and supplying their brain with only an adequate sense to follow an argument or have a conversation. They can only engage in concrete level concepts. They can't engage in any level of understanding, and then they obfuscate, pivot, and shift the goalpost to try to run away from it. And maybe, just maybe, this is the reason why the left and right has such a hard time conversing, because when the left actually tries to engage in good faith with the right, unlike Counterpoints, who did wonderful, BPF just avoided having a good faith conversation from the very beginning. And I will add as a final note, you are not a victim, all right? You get to be abrasive and rude all you like, but you're also fully responsible for the effects that that has and the consequences that come with it.
All right. We're going to go from there to Jeb. I'm messaging Amy. So it looks like she's not going to be able to make it back for closing statements or Discord crash, but Jeb, then go ahead.
Yeah, man. I mean, usually it's the hard lefties that get people caught up in meta conversations, so we can't have a practical like policy conversation about what might like lift the most people out of poverty, which I was assuming was the end goal of the panel. Unfortunately, every step of the way, it seemed like we got caught up in this fucking bullshit philosophy bro fucking like year one at community college philosophy major logical framework philosophy bullshit, instead of just saying like, okay, let's just accept that the general population of the United fucking States thinks that it would be nice if there were less people camping in tents at the foot of their apartment building or fucking robbing their neighbors, and had a conversation about practical measures. I think a lot of people on the panel did offer some great practical measures. I think the takeaway from the conversation is it really comes down to, do we craft solutions based on helping the most people who can be helped, or do we craft solutions based on reducing the harm of those who can't, or do we find a balance in between? I think it would be good to have another conversation, a little more focused on practicality. And I would love to hear if BPF, after all of the fucking bullshit meta conversations and logical framework stuff, has any input on what we can actually do to reduce homelessness, or if the final answer is just fuck them, and fuck anybody who lives near them, because they're probably going to have to deal with stepping over them, getting robbed, or getting fucking whatever else, getting spat on in the hospital.
Okay. Counterpoints.
Well, I, for one, want to thank BPF for being a fucking shit poster, because we probably would have circle jerked a little bit. Not like crazy amount, still fun stuff, diverse opinions, et cetera, et cetera. But we do need a little bit of, shit posting every now and then in order to keep us on our toes. And so thank you for your service, sir. But I would say that when it comes to the actual conversation of what we can do, part of the reason why the right-left dynamic doesn't really work for me is because I do believe in some level of redistributive economics. I do believe in communitarianism. I do believe in actually trying to take care of people. And unfortunately, in America, since Ronald Reagan, that's become a left-wing position. But the reason why I care about these things is because I want healthy, strong American families. I want people to thrive. I want people to be able to participate in the economy in a lot of cool ways. And I want to maintain some of the older structures that seem to have served our parents and grandparents well. And I want to perpetuate these structures into the future, which tends to be a right-wing idea. So I do accept like the term of like centrist, but I get pushed all over the place. And what I would say when it comes to the homeless people is what it's really going to take is an appetite for blood and guts and shit and drugs. And unfortunately, like a lot of things that like law enforcement officers and first responders and nurses and psychiatrists and psychologists are used to, but the general public is not used to. And we really have a binary choice when it comes to the United States in particular, where we don't have a lot of social programs and a lot of people, or we do have social programs, but a lot of people don't seem to participate in them voluntarily. So they end up living in, campsites and shit. We can either push the problems away and let those people suffer and fuck them, or we can decide that it's our responsibility and we have some kind of moral duty to do it, whether or not that's a religious framework or whether or not that's a secular framework that allows us to do that. I personally want to attract as many people as possible who want to wake up and look at the world and say, hey, the world is a little bit fucked up. I can make it better by the end of the day, and I'm going to take a fraction of my energy and make the world better. However many people I can attract, even if they're degen leftoids or degen rightoids or Christian theocrats or fascists or whatever, as long as they're actually trying to make the world a better place at the end of the day, then I want to talk to them, drag them towards some positive solutions, and then try to have a positive impact. So that's what I try to do. And I appreciate you guys coming along for the journey, and thank you for the opportunity to come here. It was fun.
All right, Andrew, Big Papa Fascist.
Thank you so much for the time for the closing statement. So Counterpoint says that I was doing some shit posting. What was interesting is I did do a little bit, but it wasn't the stuff that you guys thought I was doing. So having moderated literally hundreds of debates, having a channel full of debates, and possibly being considered one of the finest moderators online today, I'm going to tell you, quite frankly, that what was going on here is that you guys refused to allow me to establish for you what my moral paradigm is. So what leftists always do is they say we need to agree to our moral framework, and then we can have a conversation about this in a productive way. Fuck that shit. No, we can't have a conversation in a productive way by just agreeing to their moral framework. We can only have a conversation in a productive way if you understand where I'm coming from and I understand where you're coming from. So you can say, I'm coming from a utilitarian framework where harm, and that's all I care about is harm. But then it's appropriate for me to question you on what that means, what the metrics are for it, how you substantiate it, how you ground it. Then from there, understanding that, we can move on into an actual conversation so that we both know what the hell we're talking about. But what will happen if you agree to the leftist framework is you'll say, no, I don't agree with that. And they'll say, but it obviously causes the most harm. Look, I have all these studies that says it causes the most harm. And you already agreed that you're going to accept our moral framework. So if we say it causes the most harm, we can't do this thing. It's a bait and switch. It's a classical thing that they do. And they just refuse to allow me to establish it, so I played along, right? And they call it shit posting. I call it the basics, but that's just me. So that's that's kind of where I'm at with this entire thing. Now, to be completely charitable, and I am a very charitable person. Counterpoints will tell you he's been on my program more times than you can count and debated with some of the biggest names that are out there. Point blank, to be at maximum charitable, I reached out to Notsoerudite and asked her if I could come on to the panel. I truly did want to have a productive conversation about this, but I thought we would at least be able to establish I'm a Christian conservative, and it's important to me to come at these frameworks not in a utilitarian aspect, but from my own position and arguments, but you have to understand where they come from and why they're grounded that way. That wasn't even allowed to be established as a baseline. All a single panelist needed to do was say, so what do you establish your morality on? Then they would know, and we could have an actual productive argument. It wasn't allowed. So that's why the panel got fucked up. So that none of that was shit posting. The shit posting was like me kind of making fun of the gal who was here or whatever, which I think is fair. But other than that, this wasn't shit posting. So yeah, that's all I had to say. I do appreciate you taking the time to allow me to come on to the panel. I do think I spiced it up a bit. And thank you to the moderator. Thank you to Notsoerudite. Thank you to Red Hat, the always going to come in and save the day and rescue the chick and reframe her argument.
I'm the only one with my name on my camera.
It's my closing. Is the moderator going to mute you? No. And then, of course, the counterpoints. Thank you. You're always the most good faith person in the entire sphere. I appreciate that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, man, that was fun. I appreciate and respectfully reject the sort of what would be the word? The having a brain fart. The suggestions. The suggestions. The let's be charitable since we're so charitable. We'll call it constructive feedback. That being said, I'm not going to open another panel on that.
Before you go, I did have a very good faith super chat that they wanted to interject here, and I wonder if you guys can respond to. I promise it is good faith. He asked this question, and I wanted to pose it to the panel because I thought it was pretty good. He asked essentially why there's an interjection of race into this topic at all. I can't scroll up far enough to get back.
Was there?
Back to the super chat.
I don't remember bringing up race.
I don't think anyone.
It was only alluded to based on socioeconomic position inside of society on that, and I think Amy brought it up. But he wanted to know why that was even brought up at all, which I think is a pretty good question. I think people often dive too much on the racial issue rather than the actual issue. But that this was his, so I told him I would pose it to the panel, so I am.
So this is a really good example of you guys constructing a really beautiful straw man of something that really didn't happen. And probably if Amy brought it up, the reason we didn't engage with it is we didn't find it particularly interesting or important to talk about.
Well, And if I was to take a guess, like, you know, sometimes people talk about like correlative poverty in order to talk about systemic intersectional issues and burp and all that kind of shit. So I'm sure it was brought up in that spirit of being correlative with poverty and therefore correlatively whatever the fuck intersectional.
Yeah. Disproportionate effects, whatever.
It could have been brought up as an example of why those things don't necessarily connect, rather than making them connect.
Yeah, I have no idea. It's not my postulation. I'm just reading
We'll bring
off.
Amy back this time.
It was a significantly
say.
large super chat, so I told him I would ask. So thank you.
All right.
All right.
Well, I appreciate it, y'all. Thank you for your time. We got into it a little bit, but you know, we'll see. We'll see we'll see if we can survive despite our dumpster fire
Let's do it next
moderation
week.
according to Andrew's standards. Yeah. Well, next week we can't quite do it next week. We've got something, not with this group at least. We've got something else plans for next week that's in the work. I don't want to leak anything yet. At least I think it's next week. I don't know. I'm a boomer. I can't keep up with anything, much less a schedule. That being said, man, that was a conversation, y'all. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm not going to keep you guys any longer. I think that's a good place to wind it down. I don't want to tell you guys not to, if you guys had any questions for each other, you know, I'm not going to shut you down if there was some conversation lingering that wanted to be had, but I'm not going to keep you either.
Yeah, I'm going to go talk to chat and basically show them something cool. So I appreciate y'all. Talk to you soon. Have a beautiful night.
Appreciate it.
Blah, blah, blah. Let's go talk. All right, so I've been talking to this dude for like 3 weeks that I was going to show y'all something, and we're actually going to do it tonight. So I'm going to send him an email, and I want there's 38 of you in YouTube, and there's 21 of you in fucking Twitch chat. If any of you leave, I'm going to kick you square in the fucking dick. I'm going to find your IP address, and I'm going to do it. All right, Lockhorns.io. So this is a website. And it was made by somebody who reached out to me via email. And he basically said, hey, I wanted to create a website where people can have debates similar to how they do on Twitter or whatever, but where they can track their arguments a little bit better. And so I created a profile. I created a argument topic. And then I thought this was a really interesting way for people to, if any of y'all leave, I'm going to find your tags and I'm going to ban you. But looking at it now, so it's called Lockhorns.io. So LOCKHORNS, Lockhorns.io. And you can integrate it into like Facebook, social media, all that kind of stuff. And creating a profile is actually super easy. It's pretty simple. And what you do is you create an argument, and instead of it just being like a shit show Twitter, nobody can keep track of the arguments, all that kind of stuff, it's supposed to help people create and track formalized arguments. So this is actually an argument that I created. Our internet political pundits, good for our national discourse. And then basically this is somebody with the positive. Absolutely, media companies all have profit motives, which inevitably interfere with their adherence to pursuing the truth. Therefore, having an assortment of creators from all different backgrounds and positions on the political spectrum is extremely beneficial to public discourse, as it allows people to easily fact-check and not exclusively rely on big media. Of course, newspapers and Sunday morning shows have always existed, but internet political pundits take it to the next level by, as previously stated, the pure number, and two, how they actively foster discourse by interacting with each other and building communities. And then there's an alternative here. So you can actually see that there's two rebuttals to the argument, and you can track the arguments by agree or disagree with their color coding. So basically, here's somebody talking shit about political pundits, and here's somebody following up with talking shit, and then here's a rebuttal to the rebuttal. So basically, you can track both sides of the argument. We lost 4 people on YouTube. We're going to find those people and ban them. But the point being that it's a formalized way to track arguments. So if you want to bring your autism to the next level, then go ahead and check it out. So Lockhorns.io, and I'll link it in chat. And I will email the dude and tell him that we talked about it. And maybe I'll just shout it out every now and then, just because I think it would be fun for you autists to fucking track your arguments. But if you do have questions yourselves, if you do have questions or concerns or points or anything like that, go ahead and do @Counterpoints in the chat right now, and I will scroll to the top, scroll to the bottom, answer all your questions, and we'll probably call it a night. What's today? Yeah, I might have to do... Then watch the movie, retard. Sorry. All right, here we go. Yeah, I think I was supposed to have one other person that I was supposed to talk to tonight, but I'm a little tired, so I think I'm just going to reschedule him for tomorrow or something. But scrolling to the top, scrolling to the bottom. Yeah, okay, so Calabar says, yes, BPF is way to the right of me. Okay, so my first conversation with Big Papa Fascist was actually kind of shitposty. He was, like, talking shit about how gays were unnatural or whatever, and I kind of brought up, like, no, they're not. Like, not really. Like, if you look at nature, if you look at this, if you look at that. But I found towards the end, because I wasn't a pussy throughout the conversation, that he was pretty fun and, like, funny and shitposty and mean in a way that I'm used to with my family. And so I really enjoyed his personality despite not agreeing with his politics. And I've been back on the Crucible a few times, and I really do enjoy engaging with the further right, because BPF and his host Pedro, his co-host Pedro, I find that they try to actively engage with what I'm saying, and then the alternative person will sometimes engage with me. Sometimes they'll be charitable, sometimes they'll be uncharitable, sometimes they'll be an interesting conversation, sometimes they'll be a little bit tough. But no matter what, I find that I'm being challenged in a way that's fun, where we're talking about the ideas instead of talking about how the other people are pieces of shit. And that's what I actually enjoy about right-wing debates, is the fact that we're talking about ideas instead of talking about how big the other person is a piece of shit. So, he's only mean when he's not sucking up to Vosh. I don't know who we're talking about, if we're talking about me or if we're talking about BPF, but, you know, Vosh, when he's on his best behavior, can be an interesting and charming guy, and when he's not on his best behavior, he can be frustrating. So, it is what it is. KOE Nation says, as an outsider, I can say the moderator is being quite adversarial to the panelists with the green wall. So, this is accurate, but I like the moderator's style, because oftentimes they can be always like trying to play to like a certain level of fairness, where they're like, oh, even if you're being a dickhole, you know, I'm going to try to match the time, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I felt like he was, rather than trying to track time or trying to track like participation, although he did do both, he was more trying to track the argument, and he was able to restate the argument that everybody was making, which I thought was cool, because oftentimes you can tell with Dylan and Prime, sometimes they'll be checking chat or something like that, and they lose track of the argument. So it's nice. It's a little refreshing to have that. So Andrew is adversarial with anyone, so the moderator kind of has to push on it. Yeah, exactly. So at Counterpoints, no way that's not true. Yeah, so somebody in chat said like, oh, Prime's got cancer. And then, no, Prime doesn't, at least to my knowledge, doesn't have doesn't have cancer. Literally, someone on Kiwi Farms fucking said it. So, I don't think he actually does. So, no, don't worry about it. We just had a cancer scare in chat, but it's not actually cancer to our knowledge, unless he makes an announcement. So, continuing to scroll, checking your guys' questions. If you do want me to answer your questions, do add Counterpoints in chat. As always, donos, super chats, all that kind of stuff is appreciated but not required. And then if you don't want to do a dono tonight but you want to contribute to the channel, obviously like the stream, comment, all that kind of stuff, all of that helps. But also you can go to patreon.com/counterpoints. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to plug that in case any of you are feeling jumpy. I want money. I want to do this full time eventually. Counterpoints. Let me make sure it actually loads properly. Boom. Patreon.com/counterpoints. There you go. Check that shit out. If you want to support us, because eventually we want to do this shit full time. Jebtan says he set a squat PR during the President Sunday debate with Erudite. I think that's fucking hilarious. And I like that. I was trying to jump in and kind of like state Erudite's argument a little bit more aggressively, and like kind of like poke at Andrew because he was getting a little shitposty. And I like that she was like, no, fuck you, I can articulate my own shit. And she kind of took over. I kind of loved it. You know, oftentimes the femoids aren't that aggressive, so I appreciate it. But Connor, he was full of purple porpoise puss. That's a terrifying sentence. See, I get all the hugs. So true. I try to be good faith all over the place. Thank you to the 31 people who stayed for the Lockhorns show off and for hanging out for questions. I do appreciate you. And thank you to the full 18 on Twitch who hung out the entire time. So I do appreciate y'all. At Counterpoints, well, it was a fun shit stirring. This panel was brutal. Are you going on Mask Off on Sunday, or do I have to wait a week to watch a discussion about Supreme Court decisions? Nah, I'll be there. Good debate. Loved it, bro. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, Cullivar. I appreciate you, buddy. At Counterpoints, love the Lockhorns idea. Are we allowed to argue both sides, or do we get locked into one side? Actually, that's an interesting question. I don't know. You should play with the algorithm and take a look at it. But I thought it was a pretty good idea for formalized, particularly like academics. Like if you're in college, or if you're taking a debate class, or if you're trying to track arguments, or if you're trying to practice to get onto the panel scene, I think that you could view that as a good debate tool to keep track of the arguments so you can practice before you jump on the debate scene if you want to do that. I think it would be a great training tool as well. What is your policy on us inviting people to the Discord? I know a guy that would be great shitster and also does police IT and would love to bring him in. Yeah, Jade, go ahead. I have no problems with that. I want to build the community. Pretty much the only requirement for the community for you to invite somebody in is if they're cool.
Putting toward another AJW conversation.
We'll try it again. I did read some of his sources and they're so fucking boring, but all right, we'll try. On the Lockhorns website, I don't see the option for they talk about nothing really and only feel important due to their own narcissism button. I think you got to type that out, bud. At Counterpoints, BPF is the Vosh suck up. It's so funny. Great job tonight, dude. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate. Yeah. Then I love how everyone admires your good faithness. Yeah, I hope it spreads a little bit that like you don't have to be a pure shit poster or debate lord. Like, I mean, I've gotten plenty fucking angry on previous posts and panels and shit and yelled at plenty of people, porpoise, pussy, p words. But in general, I do try to approach people with the level of charitability that they'll extend to me. So at Counterpoints 40K stuff, ever listen to No Man on YouTube or the Guardsman story on all things D&D? No, but I am always building out my 40K media library. Sorry. So if there's anything violent or fun, tell me about it. Weld QC John, donating, putting towards another AJW conversation. I found that conversation quite frustrating, but if you want it, yeah, sure, fuck it. I mean, he's in the libertarian such an atom, gravity well, and I love the such an atom gravity well. They're seriously like two creators that I can actually watch without getting a fucking aneurysm. Have you been able to gauge Floridian sentiment in regards to Roe v. Wade? Regular folks, not the government there? No, because my wife is very passionate about it, and I haven't talked to anybody else, so I think my perspective is a little bit colored. AJW doesn't seem to debate. He will do stuff with Lauren Southern, but other than that, not so much. Yeah, we have a debate. As a matter of fact, you can go check out the second channel. I'll post that as well. So we have a debate there, and it was actually really frustrating because I felt like he didn't concede things that are obvious, where it's like, hey, bro, if you invest in people, on average, they will do better. And he was like, nah, some people are just stupid. And then we just did that for like 2 hours, so it's pretty frustrating. At Counterpoints, I know you have talked about watching and being a fan of Counterpoints, but given that, what is your opinion of Blair White? So, I mean, like, I have the same opinion that everybody else does of Blair White, where she's like, look at me, I'm one of the good transes. Like, I think that's her most popular content, and she's a good-looking gal. Am I super straight? Pretty sure I'm super straight. Couldn't really do the things, not to mention I'm married, but, overall, good-looking gal, happy that she's successful, all that kind of stuff. So what was the convo? Yeah, it was pretty much just about like whether or not systemic racism or disparate incomes is something to give a shit about, and then whether or not investing in communities in order to improve them is something worth doing, and whether or not, or how we treat criminals. Should we even care about recidivism, or should we just care about aging them out of criminal behavior? And that was kind of like, if I remember correctly, the conversation was a long time ago, but I remember that being the conversation. It was just a little frustrating. So he didn't want to concede anything, even if it seemed like obviously true. So really, really kind of a frustrating conversation. But at Counterpoints, what was that convo? Yep, he really pushes it. Yeah, he pushes those race stats. Yeah, he's pretty big on the 1350. And he was like, you're just saying not all. And that really pissed me off, because I really used to fucking hate when like the jihadist arguments would be like, not all. Like I really hated that argument. So to be accused of that argument like was really frustrating. But the truth is, not most. not even like a statistical majority. It's a statistical minority that could be systemically dealt with if you cared about educational outcomes, mentoring, economic involvement, like all that kind of stuff. You could probably get a majority of these people out of the intergenerational criminal cycle, but he just didn't seem interested in that line of thinking at all. Did you say you would be speaking to Sargon at some point? Yeah, so Citron Adam kind of floated that a couple of times. I haven't asked specifically. I don't really want to be like super clout sharky, considering I talk a little bit of shit about Sargon every now and then. So I don't want to be like, hey, can I talk to Sargon because I want to steal his audience? Like I don't want to be like that. I just kind of want to float in the general orbit of Sitch and Adam and go on for fun conversations. And if we bump into each other, we bump into each other. And if there's ever a topic where I feel like it would be fun and we build any level of rapport, I'll reach out. So I don't really want to force it. I want to organically grow. And right now I think I'm still small enough that I'm probably beneath consideration. So actually to share this with y'all, probably 15,000 of our subs, we're at like 25K right now. 15,000 of our subs are 40K subs. So they're related to the media breakdowns. They're related to Hammer and Bolter. They're related to Angels of Death. They're related to Astartes. So literally more than half of our channel are Warhammer 40,000 people who don't, generally speaking, take an interest in politics. And then when it comes to the political people, I do have like a lot of curious people. So I probably have 10K subs for politics, but people who actually engage with the political content is between like 1 and 7,000. And 7,000 is only for the drama content, and probably 1 to 3,000 is for the general debate centrist outlook content. So, so basically what I would say is the political community is smaller than the 40K community. And so we're still pretty small overall, even though I think we punch above our weight class. So I still, I enjoy what we do, but we need to be smart about our clout and not think that we're bigger than we are. So, yeah. Do you think... at Counterpoints, I know I wash it. He is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. All the sources ironically call for a better social safety net. I know. That pissed me off. I literally read one of his books and it talked about early childhood education. And I was like, hey, bro, one of your sources literally advocated for one of the policy prescriptions I brought up in our debate. And he's like, bro, you just have confirmation bias. And I pretty much told him to go fuck himself after that point. Because it's like, oh, your source that you cited to me agrees with me and I'm just reading it because I want to read it. Like, fuck you. Uncharitable, cunty thing to say. At Counterpoints, do you think that Destiny is going to be successful in rehabbing Lauren Southern's public image? No, because she's too edgy. She's too fucking edgy. She liked a pretty edgy tweet about fucking pit bulls the other day, and I was like, hey, this is going to be like retranslated for race realist shit. You know that, right? And she's like, fuck them. And I was like, okay, you're going to get fucked on this one, but whatever. She can manage her own career. I'm not her fucking dad. At Counterpoints, another creator you should check out or try to check out is Stephen Michael Davis, a.k.a. Scuba Steve. Okay, I'll take a look. I will pester Sargon with super chats until he breaks. Cullivar, pester me with super chats until I break. Jesus Christ, bud. I need the fucking money. Sargon doesn't need any fucking money. At Counterpoints, is Sargon still popular? I feel like I don't see much buzz about him. Yeah, it's because he doesn't do debates anymore. So he just does his own thing in his own little hug box. So isn't Sargon a white nationalist? No, he just wants England for the English, which like English includes like Commonwealth colonial people. So yeah, anyways. Sargon's audience is the same as Lauren's. They're going to think you're a leftist anyways. Yeah, you say that, but we do have like Sitch and Adam, like liberals and shit posters and centrists. So yeah, Counterpoints, 40K is way more popular than politics. I hit 9K subs. Congratulations, bud. Yeah, we're thinking about doing like a second 40K channel eventually. Tell us how you really feel. I pretty much do all the time. So at Counterpoints, the truth is the mainstream right to no longer wants to debate lefties in the marketplace of ideas anymore. I have heard of other right-wing panels with Styx and Hammer. Yeah, so apparently Styx is going on something... LTR, BTR, I forget what it stands for. Oh, Breaking the Rules. He's going on BTR. But, yeah. Magnavol. At Counterpoints, who are you dying to debate these days? Nobody really. I've kind of done all the big ones. So, obviously I'm always looking for something to talk to Destiny about. Vosh is a little bit selective these days, so I would always talk to Vosh. Then I would, obviously I take any of the big names. I go with Richard Spencer apparently is pretty small, so he's taking debates from people now. And like, I'm not trying to like shit talk, but you know, basically you go from being the face of ethno-nationalism in the United States to debating Twitch streamers. You know, something's gone wrong, right? Then what was I thinking? I would do Richard Spencer just for the sake of having the conversation. Obviously, Sargon would be pretty big. Then I always love doing Stitch and Adam. I always love doing Destiny. I always love doing Vosh in the butt. And I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, I would work with Erudite all the time. She's good people, so I hope she continues to grow and do well. So yeah, I'll take anybody. Basically, I'll debate anybody. Did you hear they overturned Roe v. Wade yesterday? Yes, I did. Yeah, his gun debate on BTR was not bad. Good. Magnavol, at Counterpoints, am I crazy to think that all online conservatives are really stupid when they debate with the exception of you, Tiberius, and Jebtan? Yeah, kind of. But we're like pretty centrist compared to them, and also we're looking at economic redistributivism, so... Anyways, so that kind of like, that puts us at odds with the majority of the right, but I'm hoping that by us continuing to debate and stake out right-wing positions while also being conciliatory, but also being redistributive economically when it makes sense, I hope that becomes more popular on the right, and I think it will. I think it will over time. I think we're just a little early, which is fine. Better to be early than never. So, yeah. Fucking Danabo fucking DM'd me 2 hours ago because he fucking apparently Rob Norris shitposted so hard he got kicked off of he got kicked off of Hippy Dippy. Oh man. Nice. Oh, nice. So 500,000 people are homeless, and about a quarter of them are seriously mentally ill, and half of them have some level of mental illness. That's interesting. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Apparently people are losing their shit. All right, I'm going to check the questions one more time. You believe in redistributive economics? Yeah. I believe in public education and making sure people aren't stupid as fuck, and the military and law enforcement. Voosh in the touche. Host me, bro. Jupy, are you live? What's your at Jupy? What's your fucking tag? Is it Jupel? At Counterpoints, what do you think the implications are with Roe v. Wade overturned? It's going to go back to the states. A bunch of Republicans are going to overplay their hand, and the Democrats are either going to respond or they're not. I hope you and the family are well, by the way. Thank you, buddy. We're doing well. They had Turk instead. Would have preferred you, even though I usually disagree with you. Lol, it's kind of fun disagree, if that makes sense, lol. Yeah, of course. Bosch has been talking about arming folks, which is good, I think. Maybe you could talk to him about how to safely do that. Yeah, I DM'd him earlier today about that. Because we were just DMing about whether or not he would do the Stitch and Adam thing. He's still entertaining it, but he's also not committing to any firm dates. So, you know, dude, literally any Sunday, just say, hey, I want to come on for an hour, and then they can yell at each other and we'll call it a fucking day. Yeah, I do think it's based that Vosh is pro-gun, and also I'll train anybody on fucking guns. I don't give a shit if you're a fucking commie. I'll fucking train you. So, all right. Let me see if Jupel is fucking live, and then I'm going to send the Twitch people. Which is funny, because now we got 64 fucking people because the Hippy Dippy's probably over, so we got like 10 people over from fucking Hippy Dippy. And I appreciate you guys, but we were just over on Erudite's channel doing debates and shit, and my neck's starting to hurt, so I want to dip. So if y'all want to do like questions or whatever, do questions real quick, but we're about to dip. So I'm going to raid somebody with Twitch while you guys are writing questions. So let's get this over here. Then Twitch will raid Jupel. So ask your questions now because I'm doing shit in the background. Jupil. Jupiter Jones? Oh, there we go. Jupy _10. Yeah, let's do it. I don't know what the fuck this guy's doing, but we're going to go check out his shit, see if anybody's doing that. All right, so while you guys are getting ready to raid, let me just check chat one more time. Thanks for the stream. You are welcome. Have you heard of the amazing Lucas? Yeah, he talks shit on fucking Twitter and then he backs off. I'm like, let's talk about it on stream sometime. And he's like, nope. It's like, all right. Whatever. I'll talk to Amazing Lucas anytime you want. As a matter of fact, if you're boys with him, literally harass him or fucking DM him. I already told him twice like I'd come on because he's got relatively low views for his size, but he's fucking huge. There's always Gappy V. If you're looking for someone to raid tonight, runs a late show and does a fun one. Yeah, I'll raid Jupil, but I'll raid Gappy in the future. All right. Meet Zero this. You should add him. Generally, he sent it right. Dope. Always happy to, like, literally DM me him on Twitter because that'll be fucking fun. All right, so let's do it. Love you guys. Go check out our friend. Be nice. Be kind. I appreciate y'all. Yeah, a lot of Dems are dumb on guns. So true, King. All right, I appreciate y'all. Science fiction, political philosophy, nerd, Marine Corps, and law enforcement veteran. Go ahead and subscribe. Like, share, subscribe, dislike, all that bullshit. Go to patreon.com/counterpoints if you want to. And then if you don't want to, that's cool, but fuck you a little bit. Appreciate y'all. Catch you in the next one. Bye. Hi guys, welcome to Counterpoints. My name is Connor. Today